going to reconvene the meeting this morning.
There were several that we had the same that you didn't have a spot there. I didn't know whether you agreed or disagreed or how.
Good morning. Before we get started, Dr. Ebersole, I think that was a terrific presentation this morning. I think I can speak for the curators that we enjoyed that. And I can also tell you that the topic this morning was closely aligned with some of the discussion that we had yesterday, so it was particularly interesting from that standpoint. So thank you for a very good presentation. We are going to readjust the agenda a little bit after the chair's presentation. Dr. Hal Williamson is going to do the health presentation, University's Health Center presentation, so we can get Curator Haggart off to a flight in a reasonable period of time. So we're going to take the liberty of adjusting that agenda just a little bit. Good morning and welcome to the University of Missouri Board of Curators here at UMKC. I want to thank President Forsey and UMKC campus for their gracious hospitality last night during the Presidential Awards dinner. This annual showcase of some of the best faculty and student leaders among our 4 campuses highlights just how remarkable we are as an institution. From the high caliber of teaching, research, and service by our faculty to the entrepreneurial spirit of our students, we have much to be proud of. I commend all the winners again for their foresight in knowing how best to achieve greatness. It is within this context of foresight, then, that I framework my remarks for you today. We currently sit with an uncertain future. Our economy is woefully lagging, and the timing of its recovery is unclear. Our state's financial resources are wavering, not near where they were at this time last year. Even the way students are approaching higher education and certainly the way that they learn is changing. But recognition of our constantly changing environment is only one part of the equation. We must also have the foresight to anticipate these changes, to be poised to adapt, and to shift our priorities to those that will best help us meet the needs of those we serve. And I say with much enthusiasm and appreciation that this is exactly how I characterize the University of Missouri today. Let me provide a few examples. On the cusp of a presidential election that loudly touted the need for an energy policy, the University of Missouri organized the state's first ever energy summit that brought together businesses, researchers, venture capitalists, teachers, students, and citizens across the state and beyond. It was met with phenomenal success. More than 2,000 people attended the 2-day summit in person and virtually via the internet, and thousands of dollars were pumped into Columbia economy through out-of-town guests, support of local vendors, and sponsorships and exhibits. More important, though, is the fact that we advanced the bar on energy policies and issues. As President Forsey will address in a few moments, there are numerous outcomes from the summit that will benefit us all. But it is the foresight and leadership in convening so many groups and bringing together some of our alums who are themselves energy experts that we are the most proud of. Also, within the context of an uncertain economy, the university had the foresight several months ago to institute cost reductions and efficiencies among all campuses and the system. These guidelines, which range from a hiring freeze to a moratorium on travel and non-capital expenditures, have contributed to savings across the system. Travel expenditures, for instance, are down 14% as of the end of April. Professional and consulting services, as well as non-capital renovation and equipment expenditures, are all down 3%. Overall campus hiring is half of last year's rate, and the systems restructuring announced just 2 weeks ago is expected to save the university more than $2 million. With the foresight to know that increases in state funding for higher education in the coming years is uncertain at best, these savings will be reinvested in strategic priorities and provide a hedge for the economic uncertainties that lie ahead. Even the way we communicate is changing, and President Forsey and his wife Sherry, along with Cisco and AT&T, have made generous donations of telepresence systems at all campuses that will enhance communications. This system, which will go live in June, puts the university in elite company with few other major research universities that have this capability, and will afford us endless in-person, virtual, collaborative possibilities. The world literally will soon be brought together at our fingertips or our telepresence screens as a result of the foresight of this university. So thank you, President Forsey and your wife, Sherry, for helping us along that way. And I know some of the curators had a chance to see a demo yesterday. Are there any that are going to take advantage of that opportunity afterwards? They need to know that. There is, Gary, there is at least 1, 2, and possibly 3 if I have time. As a final example, the university has had the foresight to realize that precious state resources are unlikely to be spent on numerous capital needs facing the university. With the necessity of having buildings that rival our reputation as a premier provider of higher education, we will bring to the full vote of the board today a proposal to finance, borrow money, to ensure we have the physical resources necessary for our students and faculty needs. Having said that, we have done a lot of borrowing in the last few years. We have increased our indebtedness probably about 50% over the last few years to provide facilities that we have not been able to construct because of scarce state resources. We're getting to the end of that road, and we have to be very selective how we take on additional debt. But we are able to do that today, and that is a very good move, I think, for the university. It is true that uncertainty abounds. As a practical matter, it always will. What is important and what we should be proud of is the foresight with which we are meeting the challenges and adjusting our course. For that is the very definition of foresight. That's to perceive the significance and nature of events before they have occurred. As Edmund Burke once said, you can never plan the future by examining the past. We should be proud of this as this institution continues to look ahead and be grateful for leadership that is always adjusting the sails. Thank you. That is the chair's report, and we're going to go right to Dr. Hal Williamson with the health report. Dr. Williamson, are you ready to do that?
I am. Thank you. Thanks, Bo. I appreciate that. I have some the quarterly report from the health sciences at the University of Missouri, and then Mr. Nikas will give you an update on our financials for this quarter. So could I have the first slide, please? First, I'll talk about MU Healthcare, which you know there's been a reorganization, so I'm going to talk to you about the MU Healthcare, which you would have known in the past as hospitals and clinics, and then about the schools, and a little bit about university physicians. You know that we're planning transition for the Mid-Missouri Mental Health Center to MU on July 1st. We're very excited about this. Jim Ross and his team have spent several hard months with some difficult negotiations with the state and several institutions in the state. We think this is the right thing to do for all the right reasons. We're confident that we can break even or do better financially, and this will be a real assist to us in terms of the academic part of our institution, and certainly an assist to the people of the middle part of our state. So we're excited about that, and I'll tell you about the leadership on a later slide. The MU Healthcare Advisory Board has met twice. As you know, there's an advisory board, a non-fiduciary board for the health system. President Forsey is the president of that board. I think it's fair to say that that group is a quick study, but it's a complicated set of topics, and I think the first two meetings have been pretty much educational, getting them up to speed about what the issues are that we deal with, and the next two meetings will bring them some knotty problems to help wrestle. I want to acknowledge that this is the fiduciary board. We and the board understand that, but we hope to be able to process some issues a little bit more thoroughly before we bring them to you in the future. We're applying for the Missouri Quality Award. I don't know if you know about this. This is a wonderful asset in our state for both business, educational, healthcare, and other institutions. This is really all about performance improvement. Last year we were one of 12 sites that got invited after a rigorous set of applications. We didn't get the award. This is one of those situations in which the journey, as opposed to the end of the journey, is the issue. They are really helping us focus on improving our performance in a number of areas, from HR through finance, and that's been very helpful and fun. Computerized physician order entry, or we call that CPOE. You're familiar with the concept of doctor's orders, and you're familiar with the concept that doctor's orders are often mumbled or scribbled illegibly. We're infamous for that. What you may or may not know about is that we think that's one of the leading causes of medication errors in hospitals and outpatient settings. Computerized physician order entry means that there are no more written orders. Orders go in electronically from doctor to nurse to pharmacy, and they can be tracked that way. And if I order a drug to which the patient is allergic, the electronic system immediately informs me of that. We have two more big pieces to add to our electronic medical record at the University of Missouri, and we'll be in the top category. There's a categorization of how advanced your electronic medical record is. We're probably in the 75th percentile now. After this is done, we'll be about the 90 or 95th percentile. Only about 17% of hospitals in the country now are even to the stage where we are. So this is exciting. I bring it up because it'll be very stressful for our organization. This isn't just about turning on computers. This is about changing the way everybody works. It's about changing the way that doctors and nurses interact with pharmacists. We're looking forward to it, but it will be difficult. Level 1 trauma center verified by the American College of Surgeons. You may know that the states designate trauma centers as 1 through 3. 1 is the highest, that is the best and most complete level. But this is an additional step, sort of a higher standard, if you will. The American College of Surgeons has a committee on trauma that has a higher bar to pass, and we just received the letter that we are now certified by the American College of Surgeons, and we're only one of 2 institutions in the state that has the ACS certification. We're very proud about that. That was a year of tough work, and we have some great new trauma surgeons and a great new trauma team, and I hope that you never need them, but if you do, I'm glad they're there for you. Next slide. Yesterday, you heard a little. You approved, and thank you very much, funding for our new tower. We call it a patient care tower. I'm sorry this slide isn't very effective, but right in the middle is the architect's rendition of our new building. It'll be about 7 stories. Next slide, and it will kind of peak up from behind the current entry to the hospital. By the way, I should say, parenthetically, I was talking to Mr. Nikas earlier. After having previewed the Chancellor's slides, I need to tell my team they need to up it a little bit on the graphics. But that's a kind of a boring-looking building, but it's going to be wonderful, and we're really looking forward to it. It will really change our hospital was built in the 1950s, and those of you who have been in it would feel that way. And although the de Medicis built buildings to last for a couple of thousand years, it doesn't work that way with hospitals. We're about tapped out in terms of how many things we can put in the ceilings and the walls. Most of our patient care rooms in the old building are double rooms, which doesn't meet the current standard either for patient satisfaction or for safety and quality. So we're very grateful to you for passing on that yesterday, and we're looking forward to opening that in a couple of years. Next one. The first 2 floors of that building, as you heard yesterday, will be the reincarnation of the Ellis Fischel Cancer Center. You may or may not know the Ellis Fischel Hospital, when it was started about 75 years ago, became the model for interdisciplinary cancer care in the world, really. MD Anderson in Texas, which is now famous for its cancer care, was actually modeled after Ellis Fischel. It is 75 years old, and this will be the Phoenix, and we're really excited about it. Our oncologists are excited, and it will, I think, allow us to recruit some new and different talent than we have now, and our patients will be very well served by that new facility. Next. The Missouri Orthopedic Institute will be opening in the summer of 2010. That is about 60% completed right now. Will be really a state-of-the-art orthopedic institute, and with our friends and competitors, the Columbia Orthopedic Group across town, I think Columbia will be a real magnet for orthopedic care from border to border, and we're excited about this one also. Next one. Our children's hospital right now, you may or may not know, is 2 floors of the old hospital, and all the things I told you about the old hospital are true in spades for the children's hospital. Most state-of-the-art care, tertiary care and quaternary care for children occurs in facilities that are designated for children care, and it's not just the size of the rooms or the fanciful art, but if you're a child or the parent of a child who's sick, you really want people taking care of you from the beginning to the end who are used to caring for children, and that's a little bit hard to do in an adult hospital. We'll be moving sometime in probably the summer of 2010, all the current facilities and services, surgical and otherwise, over to this institution, and Columbia Regional Hospital will become a women's and children's hospital, and we're excited about that as well. This will provide about 56 private rooms for children, including 13 ICU beds. Unfortunately, the care for children in hospitals these days, like the care for adults, is moving towards a higher and higher acuity. In other words, we don't admit people to the hospital anymore unless they're pretty sick, and that's true of children too. We're excited about that. That bed count, by the way, doesn't count the neonatal intensive care unit, which is a separate bed count. This will be wonderful. We wish we could provide them more than $12 million for their upgrade, but this will be a substantial improvement in our care for children. Next slide. So the first one is the one piece of not so good news that I bring to you, and this is a complicated one to understand. I know that President Forsey has communicated this with you in the past. I want to be as clear as I can about it and would be happy to answer questions. It is complicated to understand, however. The Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education accredits residency programs. Residents and fellows, you know, are the training periods after medical school before practice. They last from 3 to 5 years. We have 39 of them at the University of Missouri. The ACGME, as we call it, accredits both the individual residency programs and the institutional oversight of those residency programs. We have 39 residency programs, all of which are accredited. In any time in the life history of an institution, there will often be single programs that are either on probation or are a concern from the ACGME, and they have to be upgraded. We don't have any of those at the current time. All 39 of our programs are intact. And I would say, backing up, the press about this really called this a medical school probation. It's really not the medical school. The office that supervises the residency is housed within the medical school physically and administratively, but the medical school is accredited by a different agency, the LCME, and we got an outstanding report from them less than a year ago. We have the maximum accreditation of 7 years, so that's a separate issue that gets confused sometimes. Like I said, all the 39 residency programs are accredited, and none of them are on probation. That's the difficult part to understand. But they also come in and accredit the institutional oversight of the programs. And I think it would be unfair to say that this is just paperwork. That would be wrong and unfair. However, many of the citations, of the 6 citations, do have to do with the paperwork, and I'll tell you what they were. Concerns cited by the ACGME involved the proper referencing of policy language in manuals, resident representation at meetings, institutional processes for reviewing and disseminating internal reports, and the level of resources and oversight associated with the initial the administration of the residents' daily work. So roughly translated, that does mean that we had some paperwork problems, to be frank, but it also means that the accrediting agency felt like the residents were doing too many activities that weren't strictly speaking educational. So we have a number of solutions for these. By the way, I should go back and say this came from a site visit that was about 18 months ago. So this is a long, slow process, and the citation we received was from the site visit in February of 2008. Several things have happened. Frankly, the establishing the position that I now hold is helpful. This particular program is right at the intersection of the hospital and the education programs, and we are in a better position now, I think, to address some of the concerns that they have. So Mr. Ross, the CEO of the health system, and Dr. Churchill, the dean of the medical school, now take personal reports for this particular program, at least for the next year. We have reassigned and assigned more physician leadership within the GME office, and we will be hiring more people that fall in the realm of social workers and other clerical staff to unload some of that duty from residents that have it now. Typically, this probation is 2 years long. We intend to be off of probation in a year. We will ask them to come back in October and review us, which is the shortest time that we can actually ask them to return. And we're hoping, no guarantees, at their December meeting they will decide that we fix these problems, and then at their annual meeting in the spring will take us off probation. So President Forsey said, well, Hal, help us scope this. Is this like the death penalty in an NCAA sports program, or how is it from a 1 to 10? And frankly, it's a little bit hard to know. It's not a death penalty. I'd say in terms of embarrassment and how do I feel about this in terms of my peers, probably a 7. In terms of does this impede our ability, I'd say it's a 2 or a 3. As an example, I'll tell you that 40% of the MU, 40% of the MU graduating medical student class will be entering these same residency programs, and that's the highest level we've ever had. So those are the students that are actually there at the hospital all the time, so they have not had this concern. We have a concern, and we'll fix it. I think that maybe that's the best thing for me to say. And I probably should, I have a few other things, but I wanted to just stop because this is a big one and find out if you had questions about it.
Dr. Williamson, I appreciate very much your dealing with this type of problem up front and bringing it to our attention and keeping us advised. This is the type of detail I know that the audit committee would like to see in our internal audit, Nikki. I mean, tell us, give us examples, show us, and tell us how you rate it, and then tell us how you're going to fix it. So it sounds like you've got a good plan. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we do. We would rather have not had to deal with it. But this is one of those things, honestly, that these things would have been fixed by us over 18 months. They'll be fixed by us now over 6 months, and in the end we'll be better for it, but it's difficult in the meantime. So happier news, we are in the spring and summer of 2009, we'll be producing 535 people to enter the healthcare workforce, 190 from the School of Health Professions, 110 from the School of Medicine, 110 from the School of Nursing, and residents and fellows who will be entering practice, about 125 this year. So that's a nice thing that happens to us every spring. We've got people going out doing what we hope they do. In terms of the School of Medicine, the practice plan, University of Physicians, I wanted to talk to you about briefly about major recruits. Dr. John Lauriello, we brought, who's the Vice Chair of Psychiatry at the University of New Mexico. You may remember at the last Board of Curators meeting, Jim Ross told you that we decided we would not do the deal in terms of opening an inpatient psychiatric facility in mid-Missouri without John. Fortunately, John signed. He started work June 1st. He has a big job. I think we'll be able to bring you some good stories about this within a year. I think it will be difficult getting up off the ground, but I think in a year we'll have some wonderful stories, both patient-wise and I think finance and quality-wise also. Thomas Lowe is the Director of Pediatric Oncology. We've had a single pediatric oncologist at the university for about the last 2 years. She has been staggering towards the finish line. I saw her about a week ago, and she is so happy that he's coming. He came to us from the University of Iowa, where he was the director of a pediatric hemoglobinopathy program. We're very happy to have him on board. Michael Sherman will direct the neonatology program at the university, the fellowship program and the neonatology clinical program. He comes to us from SIU. He'll bring an added dimension in terms of research in NICU care. That's one of the things that we were lacking, so he fills in a nice role for us. And finally, Dr. Therakan comes to us from the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, a very prestigious institution, and he'll be the chief of cardiothoracic surgery. We're recruiting several other people, but I wanted you to understand that those are 4 recruits, and they fit in our strategic plan nicely. Finally, we had a very successful search for a new executive director of University Physicians. We had 3 really outstanding finalist candidates, and we chose Scott. He's from the University of California at San Diego, and he'll be joining us June 15th, and he was the CEO of their practice plan there. He'll be joining us as an executive director, and I think he'll be a great part of our team. And I'll be happy to answer questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Hal, first of all, I just want you to know I take great comfort in knowing your leadership role at University of Missouri Healthcare. And I think the reorganization we did a year ago is really bearing a lot of fruit. And your leadership provides all of us a lot of comfort. And I guess I'm just thank you for that.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
My question goes to the first slide. And congratulations on completing the transition of Mid-Missouri into MU Healthcare. The resolution that authorized the president to enter into that agreement had 2 conditions. The first condition was that the Medicaid be approved for reimbursement to the level that was sufficient for this to be a successful transaction. And the second was that management was to keep it as a standalone enterprise and report its financials with unit accounting so that we could determine its profitability on a standalone basis. And I wanted to know, can you confirm that we did get the Medicaid reimbursement, and do you plan to have standalone unit accounting for Missouri Mental?
Yes and yes, but I should tell you because CMS, which is the oversight body of Medicaid financing, was not willing to make a ruling on this before July 1st. We actually made an agreement with the state's Medicaid program that they will make us whole until the CMS says yes. And frankly, if CMS says no, we'll be negotiating with the state saying that, I'm sorry, but this didn't work out. And I don't anticipate that will happen, by the way.
In that scenario, the sorry it didn't work out scenario, would the university still be obligated to close on the transaction?
No, we will close on the transaction. The agreement is that after a year it will revert back to the Department of Mental Health. Yeah.
So there is an escape here if the Medicaid thing were not to work.
There is, and I suppose you could say an escape on both sides. The state is also will be holding us accountable for certain volumes and quality of service, which is good. They should. But yes, there is an escape. Yes. And the
Standalone accounting.
We will be doing that. Mr. Nikas is going to come up here next, and we will be sure that you see that. I actually think we worked really hard for several months about the financial projections. My belief is in the first, we will be bringing those to you, and my belief in the first year that we will probably, if we break even, we'll be happy, and after 2 or 3 years, I think we'll be doing quite a bit better. But yes, we do plan to bring you those financials separately.
I really appreciate the board's intent was to be able to judge this transaction on a standalone basis and
Yes.
and not have it consolidated.
It was, in the negotiation, it was very helpful for us to be able to say that we had a shot across the bow from the Board of Curators, and that it was going to be managed appropriately and financially at least break even. Thank you. Kevin.
Good morning. Quick report, Frank. Thank you. You should know, relative to the facilities in UMHC, each of the facilities, be it MRC, Columbia Regional Hospital, or University Hospital, we have standalone financials for each of them, and the same will be true for Mid-Missouri. So it's going to go forward and separately reported as needed. To give you a brief update on where we are in April, it continues the trend at the end of the last quarter. Looking at the change in net assets, the bottom line is at $16.7 million versus a budget of $24.7 million. That's $8 million behind, but we actually are in a pretty good position, because if you look at the line above that on the non-operating revenue, it's at $5.3 million actual versus the $23.7 million, which reflects the mark-to-market issue or problem on the investments, and that's an $18 million shortfall. However, because the operations are $10 million better than budget on the operating income bottom line, you're only seeing a spread there between the 16 and the 24 at 8. So operations have been able to make up $10 million of an $18 million shortfall down there in the non-operating line. As you look through the benchmarks, you can see the 3.5 is a little behind because of the investment return and market issue at 3.5 versus 5.2, but the rest on cash, et cetera, a number of them are a little bit ahead of budget. And with that, I would open it up to any questions.
What assets are being hit by the mark-to-market?
The ones Nikki would have to, what's up there on the equity side is?
Well, we've got, you may recall that the board approved a couple of years ago our ability to be able to take part of our working capital pool of $1 billion and take the bottom tranche of that and invest it side by side in the balanced fund. So it's the same set of assets that are included in the endowment fund that we talked about yesterday. So it runs the full gamut across that entire asset.
Hey, Nikki?
Yes.
They changed that for the banks. They didn't change that, the accounting rules?
No.
So these are generally real estate, real property assets?
No, they run the gamut from publicly traded equities to our private equity investments, absolute return. It's the full set of managers that we have, global fixed income. It's same set.
Same
Set.
So when we look at the endowment fund balance sheets,
Yep.
how much of the hospital's money is in there?
It's actually
It's like 30%.
Yeah, it's a small amount of the,
approximately 30%.
Yeah.
We wish it were less, but or maybe when it goes around, turns around. In May, as Nikki reported yesterday, we're going to pick up $3 million on that swing back up. Now, we'll just have to see if that continues. But short term and through April, it has caused a shortfall that operations has been able to make up $10 million on.
The good news is the operating results are very strong, right?
That's
Yes.
right.
Yes. Very correct, sir. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much.
Well, good morning. Let me just echo Curator Erdman's comments about having Vice Chancellor Hal Williamson in that role. I think we heard earlier this morning the term leverage by some of the student entrepreneurs, and I think certainly the leverage that we're seeing now already after a very short period of time, relatively speaking, is occurring between the hospital and the education professional schools at the Mizzou campus. So more to come there. Let me review kind of the agenda to be sure that everybody knows we got a little bit out of our schedule there for be sure that Curator Haggard had a chance to hear that presentation. But I'll do a very quick overview of kind of the general lay of the land at the university. I'll ask Steve Knorr to then talk about the General Assembly results. I want to spend a fair amount of time going through some of those details, and then we'll move right into the Chancellor's report, first with Chancellor Morton, then with Chancellor Carney, Chancellor Deaton, and Chancellor George. So with that, I think the theme after we heard the students earlier this morning, we ought to merge the inflatables and cookies to go. That would be a pretty good combination. I think get cookies delivered to the inflatables. So that should be a good opportunity for us. I'm going to quickly hit some items. I want to be sure that we allow some time, but I think as we think about the General Assembly highlights, then certainly where we were in November when we thought the 15 or 20 or 25% cut scenario may be coming, and on all the angst that caused us and frankly the mode that we began to operate in with the university, to end up achieving a flat budget to 2009 to 2010 in exchange really then for holding tuition flat is, I think, a very positive message to faculty, staff, and students and parents, and not without its challenges to achieve that, as you know, but certainly a good message. Capital needs, as the Finance Committee heard yesterday, were partially addressed in this session, and when I say partially, we really restored the Lewis and Clark funding. But as you also know, we have significant capital needs totaling $3.1 billion, some of which the full board will have a chance to hear part of the resolution this morning for part of that. But we will continue to pursue the opportunity for a statewide bonding initiative, and I'll come back and talk about that in just a minute. And the final point, again, as we referred to yesterday, the state's revenue picture remains uncertain. I think the state has taken very prudent action to hold in its reserves almost $1 billion, and that is in essence to hedge against a potential revenue shortfall or a lack of return to revenue that would have allowed us as we go into 2011 budgeting to be sure that we can achieve at least flat state appropriations to that level, if not better. So the state has hedged, has held back, if you will, some of the federal stimulus funding in order to do that, which I think was a very smart thing to do. We'll really cover this, but let me hit briefly when we made the system-wide restructuring announcement a couple weeks ago. In that notification, I made it very clear that I thought the best course of action for us was to continue to be very prudent in our expense management. We will continue with the headcount freeze in action. With that, we allow the campuses to make their decisions, but we want the mindset to be very prudent management of expenses, very prudent management of capital, to be sure we prioritize what our needs are going forward, and very prudent management, frankly, of cash. We have built up, some reserves for our own hedge. It may be tempting to find short-term uses of that cash, but again, frankly, I think the mode we're going to need to be in is that cash will, just as in most situations, continue to be a very important aspect for us. The system-wide restructuring, someone asked yesterday, kind of how'd that go? Well, anytime you take an action to reduce employees that have been very significant contributors, that's a very difficult action to take. We thought we needed to do that to be sure that our organization was continuing to lead the way in terms of the notion of restructuring and prioritization of our resources. And with that, we're going to have an opportunity to reinvest some of those resources in some of our priorities, and at the same time have some contingency in place for 2011. On capital, I mentioned Lewis and Clark Initiative Achieve. I should also mention that the governor does need to sign into law House Bill 22. So we continue to encourage the governor to do that. I sent him I guess we hand-delivered a letter to him last Friday outlining the actions that he needed to take to get across the finish line all of the authorization bills, including House Bill 22, which is where the capital resides. And as soon as that is signed, my expectation, just for the record, is that shovels are in the ground. If not the next day, then within 48 hours of that, because it is time to get those projects moving. On the statewide bonding initiative, again, let me be very clear. I think, my opinion, and it's I think a reasonably informed opinion in working with a lot of others in the state, that we will have no better time, probably in the foreseeable future, and you put a 5-year window on that or a 10-year window, than to take advantage of the interest rates, do that in a way that doesn't create undue risk for the state. Certainly we're not going to drive off the cliff. I think there is a way of managing the ability to go after both federal stimulus support dollars as well as take advantage of interest rates to do that. And so we will continue to press that very hard this summer. I will personally be very active in that, in working with both the House leadership as well as the Senate leadership and the governor's office to try to get momentum on this issue, because again, I don't think we will be able to build some of the administrative and some of the teaching capabilities on our campuses absent this kind of a identifiable capital funding mechanism. The state just will not have ancillary dollars, and we are rolling off, as you know, the last bonding issue of 25 years ago. So we are freeing up some operating dollars. We can go into this and have this in place by the end of 2010, thread the needle of the stimulus dollars and be able to take advantage of those interest rates. So that will be our collective summer research project. We'll report back to you on progress as we deal with that. Final point on federal stimulus, I won't go into it. Steve may mention it in passing. There were a long list of funding mechanisms that are coming into the state from federal agencies. So at two levels, in the Chancellor's report on how we're pursuing federal research dollars as a result of stimulus money, but also a significant amount of dollars that have come into the state agencies. So we are pursuing very aggressively. We have the entire list. We have the categories and where those dollars reside, and it can run the gamut of funding some of the projects that otherwise, are one-time dollars that we may want to take advantage of to some very significant research activities on the campuses. So again, a very concentrated effort in a very short period of time to be sure that we identify what those opportunities are and try to match up our campus resources to that. I have mentioned to you in the past, and I don't want to dwell on this, but the Department of Higher Education over the last couple of years has continued to work at a couple different levels to help coordinate higher education activities in the state. And at the same time, as a result of Senate Bill 389 a couple of years ago, has continued to put into place some mechanisms that were required out of that legislation. Having said that, as you know, last fall there were a number of activities that were coming out of the department that I frankly felt, and the rest of the higher education community, public higher education community, felt the same way, that not the right time to be stimulating a lot of new activity that would take away from our ability to keep our hand on the rudder through a very difficult recessionary period. So we've been very clear that our intention is to help, but that we don't have time and aren't going to take time out of our mission to take on new review activities, and we want to be sure that we cooperate, but I want to be sure that the Board of Curators knows that there are a myriad of activities going on in mission review, including facilities and master plan reviews. There was even an initiative, because it was mentioned earlier this morning at the breakfast meeting, around a homeland security review of capabilities across the campuses, and again, whether that's the department's responsibility or the responsibility of the public higher education institutions to take that on, for the department to be involved. Again, at this point in time, we want to be sure that doesn't become a distraction. So we're working with them and making our point of view very clear in that regard. In February, we talked about, again, David, to the Curator Wassinger, to our strategic planning activity for this year. We talked about 5 actions that we want to take that would represent what the university should be doing to further ensure our relevance in the most difficult period of time for the state. And we thought these 5 activities would be kind of an overlay to that and would perhaps make a difference. So these initiatives, the first 2 were required to form task forces. The outside-in initiative, in fact, the task force has been appointed. We have a meeting next week that will, again, ensure, a bit like the discussions yesterday and today, are we putting in place the workforce for the future, not to get in the way of what each dean may do in terms of its advisory committee for curriculum, but to be sure we're meeting workforce needs 5 and 10 years out. So again, I think a very important aspect for our state, to be of value to the state. The P20 pipeline task force is in place and has met. Both of these task forces, by the way, will be reading out at our planning meeting, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But the P20 initiative is really to get at college readiness. We don't want the full extent of P20 implying what they do from when they arrive at the university through, the ultimate path of advanced degrees. But we want to be sure that the university's efforts as students and all the activities that we have going on in support of K through 12 and early childhood development, that our efforts are focused. And what we found, and I think there's general agreement about this, that there's been a lot of activity, but there hasn't been a prioritization of that activity. We want the University of Missouri to provide leadership in the prioritization of activities that will make the most difference in that regard. And we have found already 18 issues that we think, if we can provide some additional insight to and focus on prioritization to, could make us more efficient in what we do in this regard. And it runs a gamut from teacher mentoring programs to programs like occur on this campus, Institute for Urban Education, to be sure that whatever those activities are across our 4 campuses, and we're going to expand this to include community colleges and the other 4-year publics in the state, that we get some additional focus and attention on this, because it frankly has languished. It's one of the reasons nationally why high school graduation rates continue to decline, and as the demographics change, that picture, if there's not some intervention, will in fact get worse over time. Performance measures, we are in the implementation phase. As you know, the intent was to be best in class, best in country in this regard. I feel we're on that track. We have now gotten to the point where the benchmarks are being established by campus. In other words, the reference points for Mizzou are different from UMKC and UMSL and S&T. Those benchmark reference points are about in place. We'll review those week after next, and then the next step will be to lock in on the targets. And that doesn't mean that the target will be exactly what the benchmark is. The target may be a 3 to 5 year target, but we'll be reporting back to you on the progress on that. And then the final point is we agreed that we would audit. We would have someone from outside the university come in and be sure that those are the right measures and that the right benchmarks are established. We'll be the ones that make the judgment about the targets. We want to be sure that we have audited that those benchmarks and the measures are the right, and we'll be reporting back to you on that by the end of the year. Economic development, let me skip to the next page just to be sure that you have some details about that. I think we did have a successful energy summit, and I think the point that I want to be sure that I emphasize is that the underpinning of that summit really was about research. Certainly there was a lot of marketing. When you bring a T. Boone Pickens in, you create a lot of, there was a halo effect which served the purpose of attracting a lot of folks to our system. But at the end of the day, what we were trying to do was showcase the research that we're doing in our institution. So we had 70-plus research papers. We had 88 posters, and if you were there, John Bowe, I know, had a chance to see what was going on there. It was about matching up the opportunities that we had within our campuses to do that. Cheryl was there, and we had a chance to see in action the matchmaking that could occur. And again, a good warm-up this morning as we heard entrepreneurs, and that's one of the things we were trying to do. So at the end of the day, I think we felt very good about that. That did cause us to be sure that we had adequate time to plan for the next summit. So we have pushed that. We thought earlier we might be able to do that this fall. We're going to push that to next spring in Kansas City, chaired by Chancellor Deaton, hosted by Chancellor Morton, to be sure we've got adequate time because this topic is as complicated as energy is. The span of life and bioscience is perhaps even broader. So I want to be sure that we are focused and relevant in that regard. Positions, we did talk about, and we've talked about in this group and talked yesterday a couple of different times about what we need to do. And again, the setup in this morning's earlier discussion was right on point about how do we get this tech transfer process in place and the processes and systems required to do that so that we are creating a very enabling environment for those researchers that have an idea. And again, it couldn't have been a better setup for the discussion about this and to be sure that we've created the processes and the systems, the support structures. And by campus, there's a fair amount of variability about that. And what we're trying to do with our Economic Leadership Council that I chair and the chancellors are members of, along with Mike Nichols, is to be sure that we're providing the oversight and the leadership for that. In addition to that, we're going to staff a couple of positions in Steve Owens' shop for transaction processing as well as intellectual property. Flip back for just a second. The final point from our February meeting was the notion of a shared service center concept. We've been spending a fair amount of time trying to be sure we all understand from a common language standpoint what is that. And shared service centers, by definition, imply that it's not just consolidating a function, it implies that there is shared governance, and we're working our way through that. We've had a workshop, including with the campuses at the provost and the chief administrative officer levels. We're going to spend a little bit more time on this at our planning meeting in a couple weeks to be sure that we know if we went down this track exactly how we would do that and what the scope would be. Probably at a minimum, what I would say to you at this point in time, we do need to take on a benchmarking activity because there's a lot of facts that are going to be hard to get at unless we go reference what is a cost of processing and transacting bill payment, what is the cost of recruiting, how do we get at some of those underlying processes. And absent benchmarking, you know, we all have opinions about that, but not necessarily the best facts. Final point is we are having a planning retreat. We have a busy couple of days in mind. Certainly we want to be sure that we are on top of what are the national higher education challenges and issues that are being discussed. So we're going to have a facilitated discussion about that. And the issues run the gamut from you know, student loan issues that continue to get a lot of national attention, as well as trends that are emerging and pressures that campuses are under around the country. We want to be sure that we're staying on top of those and, in fact, leading the discussion from our perspective. We are going to have an update on what we're doing with distance education. Someone mentioned in our session yesterday, there's been some commentary about that. I think we have an approach that's spot on, but we're going to continue to walk carefully before we run into a gallop on that. We will have in-depth reviews of the priorities that I just talked about a few minutes ago, and then finally we are going to continue to do our version of leadership development, as we talked about yesterday in the first session with the board, for our team, because there are ways that our team can work and get synergies and get leverage by finding ways that across the 4 campuses and certainly within the system office can work together. So with that, let me ask Steve Canora to come up. I will tell you that this, someone asked, well, gee, you've been on the job a year, and I said, well, now I've had 2 years of working through the budget process in the General Assembly, so I feel like a grizzled veteran at some level. But this year was particularly interesting because of the, obviously, the economic crisis that the country was in, the state was in, and how the General Assembly had to react to that, and then all of a sudden along came the federal stimulus activities, and that caused, frankly, you know, a lot of consternation about within the General Assembly and with the governor's office about what do we do? I mean, how do we bring that in? So it was frustrating at one level, and I was very sympathetic at another level for you know, this coming about at that point in time. I think we stayed very focused with our agenda, and I congratulate Steve and his team. It always takes a village to make this happen. Many of you in this room, many of the curators, many of our alumni, and our trustees, our flagship council, Alumni Alliance, everybody that we asked to pitch in, the faculty were ready to pitch in on different issues, and I want to thank you all for that. But at the end of the day, it also took someone that was coordinating and quarterbacking, and Steve and his team did a very good job of that. So let me ask Steve to step us through the results, and then we'll move through the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, President Forsey. And I'd like to start off by saying thank you to several folks as well. First, the folks on my team who represent the University of Missouri down in Jeff City late at night, early in the mornings, testifying, kind of being those spear catchers, but that's what they get paid to do. But I want to say a special thank you to them. A special thank you to the board for willing to make the phone calls, as the president said, doing the behind-the-scenes kind of things, or doing the very public things, which is taking a position early on, whether that's at large curator, and giving the opportunity for the body in Jeff City to understand what you want is very important, because if they don't understand what this board wants, then it's hard for them to move forward. And so I want to say thank you to you. Thanks to the president for having that steel spine whenever it comes time to keep all the frogs in the wheelbarrow. I use that expression a lot because we'll get everybody in, somebody hops out, it takes somebody that has that resolve to get everybody back in. And so having his leadership is instrumental. So thank you to everybody, the vice presidents, for giving us the information. We did have a good year. You've covered most of the things in here, and so I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. But I think one of the important things is to understand that the deal that was struck between the governor and the president and higher education community was very instrumental and timely. At that point in time, the facts that we did know last November was that we were being asked for a 15, 20, 25% cut and we took that very seriously and went through several different scenarios. The economic downturn and possible withholdings were very real at that point in time. We had no clue what the federal stimulus or stabilization package was going to be. And so at that point in time, for the governor to step up and really show the leadership there, we're very thankful. Ultimately, it led to the flat funding, flat tuition that we came out in the end with. Certainly having the stabilization funds and having the federal government set the threshold of a flat 09 funding to keep us held harmless, and having that funding was helpful. Ultimately, the $4.6 billion that the president talked about between the stimulus funds and the stabilization funds, which was a huge amount of money. I mean, when you start to think about $4.6 billion into the state budget, really you have about $7.5 to $8 billion totally usually. And so when you start thrusting $4.6 billion into the mechanism, it really does take a while to kind of unwind all of that and figure out how you're going to use it. Just real quickly, the things that we were able to kind of move forward and having a positive effect on, obviously, is the operating budget, caring for Missourians, the mid-mode mental health, our capital improvements, some immigration reform, and I'll hit on that, and the endowment provisions, and then intellectual property provisions as well. And so I'll just go through these real quickly, Frank. The operating budget, you already know about that. They used $49 million in the federal stabilization funds. Essentially, they were able to, the federal government set that up where we could take it from funding down to the 06 level and then backfill that to as long as you keep it at the 09 level. And so that's what that ended up being $49 million for us. They did that across the board for higher education, all the higher education institutions, which amounted to about $110 million total. They also did that for DESE and K through 12. Their total obviously was somewhere in the $500 million range. Yeah, I think you have most of these. We're held line. We had a few folks in the UM-related categories that took a little bit of a shave and a haircut, but ultimately we came out pretty even there. Next slide, please. The one-time funding that you're caring for Missourians, the $24 million there, it can be used for any one-time funding, and I know we're down the path there. The $6.5 million that was also in the House Bill 3 in our university-related line, that was part of the $13 million for capital. And so we had $6.5 million that ended up in House Bill 3, and then at the bottom you'll see there's also $6.5 million in House Bill 22. House Bill 22 had our Lewis and Clark Discovery Initiative projects. I kind of joke around with the folks throughout the year that the Lewis and Clark Discovery Initiative projects is kind of a cat with 9 lives. We are hopeful that this is the 9th life for these, and we'll be able to finish these off and move forward. But as the President said, House Bill 22 and all of these bills have to be signed, and certainly subject to a line item veto. And given the situation that we're in, certainly need to continue to make the case for Ellis Fischel, Benton Stadler, and our 8 agricultural research center projects around the state. So those are important points that we need to continue to make as we move forward. Next slide, please. House Bill 21, and this is the, not stabilization funds, but these are stimulus funds. These funds from the federal government were set up to go directly basically to departments for specific reasons. A couple key points here. One is that most of these funds are not actually in the state coffers yet. Obviously, they're not available until July 1st, so there's no money there yet for us to go to even be able to do anything with. These are kind of placeholders so that the agencies, the state agencies, are working with the federal government and kind of having some of these guidelines. Now, they have some of the broad parameters, but there's still going to be some of the details. And so our opportunity as the University of Missouri is now to work with the state agencies to say, how are you going, which direction are you going, can we be helpful in doing that? Some of them are very specific, but as you kind of go down through here, you can see that some of them, for instance, on the Department of Higher Education, they have $99 million that they're going to be putting in that pot. The department then will be working with the federal government to say, okay, here's what we'd like to do. The federal government's going to say, yeah, we agree with that or we don't. This is our opportunity to work with our state higher DHE to be able to say, these are some of the things that we think would be good and how we could use them. And so we need to be proactive in being able to do that. There are other things I may just bring your attention that are very second to the bottom, for instance, our Missouri Cancer Registry, that's something that we do. And so there's a specific pot of money there that is going to be, if it's going to happen, is going to be specifically for us. And so when you start to think again about $2.6 billion, that's how big that bill is, and it's going to go into all the different departments, and whether it's energy efficiency upgrades or research facilities, that we might be able to go work on and try to be able to get some of those funds for our capital side of things. Those are all good opportunities for us, and an opportunity that we'll need to capitalize on.
Steve, just a couple, the broadband technology, MoreNet, we run that for the state, the opportunity to go in and further extend our broadband network for purposes of connecting us with secondary education is a huge opportunity. Gary Allen is all over that. We talked a bit about healthcare technology, some of the opportunities for electronic medical records. That's at $68 million at the bottom there. So there's, within each of those categories, Steve and his team have done a good job identifying what the potential projects are. And now the campuses are all, and we're all looking at those to see how we can help stimulate the state, either to go after the federal dollars or bring them in, or as the state gets them, to be sure that we're in line to be active on that. So we will report back to you on that, because I think this is one of those inflection points in terms of research and funding for some of the activities. P20, as I talked about P20, we may be able to identify dollars that would support some of the projects that we may need additional funding for that otherwise we wouldn't get from the normal state budgeting process.
And I just think the opportunity for us probably here in the next week or so, and mentioned to the chancellors, we'll be working with your vice provost for research or others, and Nikki and all the vice presidents who have had a chance to go through this bill. But really over the next couple of weeks is really going to be key for us to hone in on this bill. We have an opportunity here before the funds arrive to help maybe set the stage. So next slide, please. Some of the authorization things that we needed to take care of, immigration reform, that was a bill that was put in place 2 years ago that had a little bit of a technical conflict. Before we could accept a student, they had to have their paperwork from the federal government. And so on the flip side of that, the federal government says, before we're going to give you your paperwork, you have to be accepted in an institution. We're not just going to give you your paperwork and allow you to go to any institution. We kind of want to know where you're going to go. And so we had a little conflict between the federal and the state laws there, so we're able to clean that up, which was important, obviously, for us. And then we also had a process established that says not knowingly provide financial aid to any illegal alien coming in. We set that process up with the department. Well, all of the higher education institutions in the state then will kind of certify to them. So some important language for us. We could have had some real disasters there of potentially lining up every student that we have, even Missouri resident, quite frankly, of kind of lining them up from Jesse Hall down to Faroe Field, making sure we had an idea. And so we have that taken care of, and that was important. Many of you know about the endowment provisions that we were able to get through. There's a specific provision in state law that deals with our endowment. We're able to say that you can now assess up to a 2% of the endowment for administration and development functions. In this bill as well was the UPMIFA, which is a uniform code that allows a little bit of a better understanding of how you can deal with the old and small rule and scholarship or endowments. And so if you have somebody that used to be want to be a dairy farmer from northwest Missouri, Nottoway County, and there's no dairies there anymore, how do you deal with funds that are set aside like that? This helps give some guidelines for those kind of things. So some important language for, I believe, for our development officers to be able to move forward on that. Next slide, please. Not going to repeat myself here and certainly how, but that was important for us to be able to move that legislation through. The intellectual property, in the end, the economic development bill that went through, we had a small provision in there that allows Mike Nichols and his shop and the general counsel's office to, when we're dealing with folks on the outside, to be able to help protect the records from a business side of things. And so a lot of times there's a little bit of confusion whenever those records come into the university. Are they public? This just helps set that, and so it sets the stage that from an IP side of things, we can kind of protect the folks that we're dealing with and the information that's coming into the university. Next slide, please. A few of the areas that certainly we spent a lot of time on and we felt like we made some good headway on compared to where we were last year was the Access Missouri Scholarship, and having the ability to move along in that, obviously with the private institutions and their concerns of taking away from $4,600 and equalizing it down to what the governor had recommended with the publics. We had a few hearings on that, had a floor vote in the Senate, which had actually lost on a 16-14 vote. But we were pleased that we actually ended up getting more votes there than we thought, so we moved along on that. That's probably something, as the President has mentioned, that we need to come back into maybe the higher education community family to have some further discussions on before that comes back into a legislative realm, but we'll certainly take a look at that and see what we need to tweak there between now and next year. The at-large curator legislation, I think you're all familiar with that. Again, I think you made some good progress, and certainly having your position on that is very helpful, but as you recall, the Senate last year and the House both passed the student curator legislation. This year, the Senate defeated that provision, and so for you to go from essentially having them pass it to defeating that provision and moving that along was important. Obviously, Representative Brian Pratt has been a supporter of the student curator legislation. He's a powerful member of the House, and we were unable to move that on out of the Rules Committee, but it's something we'll certainly continue to work on. Just a couple others that we kind of deem that need further study, quote unquote, is the conceal and carry on campus legislation that many of you read about, and certainly in the end that was one that did not move forward. It moved through the House, but then died in the Senate, and we believe that does need further study before that would move on forward. The state health plan, there was a couple bills proposed that basically would take our employees and wrap them into the state health plan, and certainly that is a very expensive proposition for us, and we feel like the wrong direction for the University of Missouri employees. And so those are two pieces of legislation that, again, we had great concern about, but we want to continue to kind of further study on. So next slide. Just real quickly, last slide here is just kind of the budget outlook and to pick up on a little bit of what the President was saying. But 09 was built on a 3.4% increase, and as revised in December.
The state's budget.
Yes. Yeah. The state's budget was on a 3.4% increase. It was revised down to decline on a 4% on the end of May, June 1. It's a 5% decline. And it's probably going to be below that, is expected to be below that at the end of the year. Why do I say that? Because it sets the stage for what does the governor have to do? Obviously, he has to balance the budget. And what does FY 10 mean for signing House Bill 22, 3, any of the appropriations bills? That means they're going to have to go through all of those bills with a fine-tooth comb. Line item vetoes clearly are going to be on the table. And so no one should take for granted any of the projects that we have in House Bill 22 when it comes to capital projects or any of those other things. I'm not trying to sit up here and scare people. It's just a reality of where we are with the financial situation in the state. And so clearly having an understanding, but also a perspective of whether it's going to be withholds and extraordinary withholds in FY10 budget cycle is a possibility. Of how they put that together. There's $716 million now left in the stabilization funds. There was 900, as the President said, almost $1 billion. But recently they've had to take $250 million of those funds to pay tax revenues, and so to get tax returns back out to folks. And so now we're down to $716 million. Basically, we need about $711 million to fill those back holes that we had last year with regards to the stabilization funds for higher education and DESE, and that was like the $49 million. And so we need about $711 million to keep us held flat again for fiscal year 11. Pretty much the same rules would apply if you're going to use the stabilization funds from the federal government into the fiscal year 11 budget. And so obviously we hope there's going to be some of those education stabilization funds that will remain for the FY11 budget. Finally, the bonding and just the push that we have there, and obviously for us to be able to move that thing along and get it to the point where we thought was a very good year for that. But we need to be able to figure out a way to get this thing across the finish line. And as the President said, the interest rates are at historic lows, and there's also a timing concern and time sensitive with the federal stimulation plan and the Build America bonds that are part of that. If you don't use those, I believe, by next December, is that right?
Issued by next December.
Issued by next
Year from
December.
December.
You lose that opportunity. And so those are very time sensitive as we move forward as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
I'm just going to, I remember back in January when we were in St. Louis, there was a kind of a dark cloud over the meeting as we were thinking about these budget cut scenarios. And, you know, I just think the preparation that you and the staff made for that has been borne out. But more importantly, no one would have thought that we would have a legislative session in that environment like we had. And, you know, we all really need to express incredible gratitude to you and Steve, the entire university team, for certainly the best legislative year since I've been on the board, at a time when the economy is in distress. I mean, nobody could have predicted that. It's a job well done, and thanks for all the extra time and effort to make it a success.
I agree with that. And Gary, all these federal funds that were coming in, for example, the $200+ million for broadband, and that category that Steve had up, as I was reading that, a lot of those decision items are decision items with the governor's office and various state agencies in conjunction with the federal government. Is that right?
Yeah, the state will have to draw down based on their convincing the particular federal agency. Some of the money will flow automatically, but most of it will be drawn down based on the state being able to make the case that on the broadband, the federal national broadband initiative, that the state can present a qualified plan that will allow the state to draw down those sources.
So our lobbying efforts really now need to shift from the legislature to the state agencies that have discretionary control over a lot of those funding?
I think that's a great way to say it. Obviously,
Yeah.
the governor's office is key in that regard.
Right.
So,
Okay.
very good.
Well, good morning. It certainly has been our pleasure to be your host campus for this meeting.
Leo, we've got several people absent.
Okay.
Maybe it's time to take a real short break, and so we have everybody here to hear your presentation.
All right.
Let's take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll let Leo get started.
Races cars actually.
John and Dave.
That's what he does on his weekends. He goes and professionally races.
I don't like old cars. I've been there. Oh, is that right?
I was hoping it was going to be 70 or 60s.
Let's gather around here, and we'll get reconvene the meeting. Apologize for that interruption.
No,
Leo,
that's perfect. Again, thank you this morning. I certainly hope that you've had an informative session here. We've certainly enjoyed being your host. Given some of the comments this morning, it made me think about the fact that I've now had the pleasure of serving this university for now 10 months. And given some of the comments made by people like Dr. Gary Ebersole, I see I have a few more checks to write to those folks who are saying all of those great things. But it really has been a pleasure. And of course, I didn't think that this was the right thing long term. And of course, President Forsey convinced me, and of course, Gail Hackett, that it would be. And of course, he was right. Personally, I can't think of anything more important to be doing with my life right now than this great work. So thank you. As I move around Kansas City, it is really a sense of pride to be associated with this university, because what I hear from parents and from students as well is that the quality of instruction here is excellent, and the quality of their experience is also outstanding. So I thought I would throw up a few things and sort of setting the stage for the state of the university, which I think is very good at this point. Our core purpose here is to get great students in here and get them, make them successful and get them to graduation. Well, we had an increase of enrollment of about 3.3%, and also saw an increase in student credit hours. We also, I got a count of the number of degrees we conferred this past year. Turned out to be about 3,400, and I, just for the heck of it, I thought I would ask, well, how many did we confer last year? It turns out it was about 2,600. So we're up about 800 over last year. And when I saw that, I said, wow, that's great. And then I thought about the fact that that means we've got to replace all 3,400 of those students in order to grow enrollment here. So that increases the challenge in this coming year. So, but that is good news. That's what we're here to do. But I want you to know that the faculty and the staff have done a great job, because while they've been working to bring in more students and to graduate more students and to add to the resources available to the state to carry on its business, they've had to undergo a number of things. Leadership change, as I mentioned, I've been here about 10 months, so they have a chancellor to train. The provost has been here just over a year, and she's doing a great job. I can do what I do because I've got a great partner in Dr. Gail Hackett. Gail, if you'd wave a little bit back there so everybody can see you again. So, in addition to that, we've hired 2 new deans. In fact, we have a Dean Tenki Tan for the Block School, who will be here in August, and Dr. Marsha Powell, who was here with us last night, who will be here as Dean of the School of Dentistry. We have another dean search on because our Dean of the School of Education has decided to retire. We have about 13 deans, I believe, so that's a significant turnover, especially since last year we had 2 new deans join us then as well. So in the midst of all of this, we're also developing a new strategic plan. Our provost has done a superb job in leading our faculty and staff in developing this plan along with members of the community, and is now in the process of talking about that draft strategic plan with members of the community, so we get their feedback, so we get buy-in, not only at the campus but in the community as well. We're introducing a new budget model in this process, one that will drive accountability and provide incentive to help grow the university in all the right ways. And of course, as has been mentioned, we've reduced headcount, we've reduced expenses significantly, and we've got a number of signature projects that we're pursuing that is out fundraising a lot. And this is a very difficult environment to do that in, but we've experienced some successes there, and we're in the process of establishing a new foundation, as you know. In addition to all of that, we have 5 construction projects going on around these campuses. So it's been a very busy environment in which to do our core business. And but we're also, because it's so important here, we're working hard by the way we do things to help develop a collaborative and transparent culture on this campus. And because it's part of our mission to be engaged, an engaged university, and especially in urban issues and education, one measure of that is the fact that this past year we were one of 6 colleges. We won the President's Higher Education Community Service Award. And that is the President's Honor Roll. That happens to be the highest federal recognition that a university can receive. So we're very proud of that. That is evidence of the fact that we're trying to live up to that mission. So the rest of what I wanted to tell you is that I wanted to talk about given you the state of this university, just talk about some of the things that we're doing to live up to that great mission that you've given us. I did go out and ask a number of the deans and members of the staff to give us some ideas about things they would believe would be worth mentioning. And I have to tell you, between 200 and 300 submissions of items that were worth mentioning. But as you know, I just thought I would put this up as a reminder. Our mission has 4 basic parts. We are life sciences health and life sciences is a very important part of this region. This region is intent on being a leader in that area, so you've asked us to lead there. You know that we are designated as a campus for the visual and performing arts, so we've been asked to deepen and expand our strength in that area. And because we are here in this city and serving an urban community and the communities surrounding it, we should be developing the workforce, and we should engage in urban issues and education. It's very important here. And of course, in order to make that happen, you must develop a vibrant learning community for our students. So I thought I would just mention a few things here. With regards to leading in the life and health sciences, to do that in this community, you have to have a great partnership with Stowers. The Stowers Institute is world-renowned, I believe, at this point. They're doing great fundamental research, And initially, when they were here, we didn't do a great job of getting started with them. But I have to tell you, I had this conversation with some of the leaders there about their relationship with Dr. Bonewall, Dr. Linda Bonewall in the School of Dentistry. And they described their work with her and the work they're doing with the university as the most substantive collaboration that they have with any partner. Now, I'm living for the day when I see that in headlines in the local papers, because that will spell a new day here. And because of that work, of course, she has gone on to get several new centers started, and she is developing a new center for the study of dental and musculoskeletal. I'm going to stop and start reading this. It's dental and musculoskeletal health. And we also have received from Stowers about $2.3 million, along with a grant to the University of Kansas that allowed us to establish a chair that will be a part of that center. Now, given our relationship with Children's Mercy and the clinical base that we serve here, this next work is very important because we have a student and that student's mentor who had a research finding that the arteries in the necks of obese children compared to the arteries of 45-year-old adults. Now that's a very significant discovery that's getting the attention of the American Heart Association, and we'll have to see where that goes. Collaboration is also a very important issue. We have a faculty at both the School of Nursing and the School of Medicine who are forming a muscle biology research group focusing on mechanisms of aging and muscle disease. Now they're using a mouse for this research, and we refer to that mouse as Mighty Mouse. They are starting to develop, the mouse was actually developed by Case Western Reserve, and the mouse, they call this a transgenic mouse because it has an overexpression of certain genes. That means that, of course, it has some characteristics that make it especially useful in this particular study. So we will have Mighty Mouse on campus, and we'll see where that takes us in the future. Now, a few other items on the life and health sciences. Dr. Ashim Mitra, we've talked about him before. He is, of course, renowned in his leadership in drug delivery. And most recently, and I think it was just this past, back in April, he was the keynote speaker at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. And of course, he spoke about strategies to overcome drug resistance in cancer cells, and this was at their seminar on translational research. Others, we have alumni like Dr. D. Denver from the School of Biological Sciences, who's had a discovery in his work on studies in molecular evolution, has determined that spontaneous mutation could recur at a rate that's almost 100 times faster than was thought before. Now, this can probably change scientists' view of how evolution, about the rate of evolution as his work continues. And in the School of Computing and Engineering, we have a new GATE lab. Well, that's a lab where you can actually measure in 3D or capture body movement in 3 dimensions. And one of the uses of that is, of course, in physical therapy. Using this equipment, a physical therapist can establish a baseline for a given patient and then measure the effectiveness of various therapeutic methods using this equipment. So those are some of the areas where we believe we are responding to the mission in the health and life sciences. And then when you go to the visual and performing arts, we have, there's a band that we have here called the Fountain City Brass Band. That band is comprised of alumni, faculty, and students, and they have won the U.S. Open Brass Band Championship, and that's their 4th national title in 2 years. Ben Gully, I don't know if you've heard of Ben Gully, but he's a tenor who is a graduate student here now. He's from Blue Springs, Missouri, but if you would listen to him, if you would listen to the top 5 tenors in the world, and you close your eyes, you would think you were listening to one of them. He sings this great song. I can't think of the name of it right now. I would sing it for you, but I don't have any backup. But he sings this great operatic song. He was in a competition with the Metropolitan what is it called? The Metropolitan Opera in New York. And I guess there were like 2,400 students, or 2,400 applicants there. He made it to the final 8. So, and he's now getting work in various places. And we could go on there because we have faculty members who are doing very scholarly work, writing books, and like winning awards from both Kauffman Foundation, getting recognition from various venues around Kansas City and nationally. Furthermore, it's very important in our School of Theater that our students get exposure to real-life theater. And we have a special relationship with the Kansas City Repertory Theater that was started here by the university. That's one of about 14 different important arts venues that were established by the university. We have a situation here where 81 of our students and 12 faculty have been involved in real-life productions. So, moving on and further responding to the mission in workforce and urban education, I think President Forsey mentioned the Institute for Urban Education earlier. This is a one-of-a-kind program in this country. What makes it unique is that these students coming out of high school have decided in advance that they will teach in urban core environments. And they get special education in teaching in that environment from the start of their education here. They go back in to student teach in their first year. In fact, within 2 weeks of the time that they enter the program. They get specialized education from people from around the country who are expert in teaching in urban environments, and they get a special attention paid to the issues of that are affecting youth in urban environments. So we've had our first graduating class. The picture there at the top is of the signing ceremony we had right here last week. We had 8 graduates, our first graduates of the class. I did tell them that I didn't want to put any additional pressure on them, but they have to realize that they will be watched. They will be watched, their students will be watched from here on out to see how effective this program is, because graduating them is just the start. The results they achieve will really be a testimony to how effective the program really is. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Southwest Early College campus. As you know, we are not a university that can afford to sit back to wait to see what comes out of the pipeline into this university. Southwest Early College campus was started last year, and it's a campus not far from here where our instructors actually go out and participate in the instruction of students. They have 6th grade and the 9th grade. These students are earning college credits. In fact, one of our instructors who is teaching math there was able to improve the math scores there so much that one of the students from the 9th grade took our freshman math test here and was one of the top scorers. So this is the type of program that we have to have in collaboration with the university that will improve the plight of students in the urban core schools. I won't talk about the Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. You got a great presentation on that this morning. That program is very important here at this university, especially in this city that has so many entrepreneurs. Not only have those entrepreneurs created jobs here, but they have also made this city one of the most giving cities in the country. Kansas City has more philanthropic dollars per capita than any other city in the world, and that's largely due to the entrepreneurs who have built their businesses here, established foundations like Stowers, like Hall, like Block, and who are giving back to this community. So producing more entrepreneurs like that in this area is critical. So but we're not only just producing entrepreneurs through programs like this, but we provide programs that support entrepreneurs when they're in business. The KC SourceLink was started here. It is now a national model. There's also now a Missouri SourceLink, But what this chart gives you is some of the examples of how they have used about 150 different organizations who provide support for small businesses to help those businesses improve. Through help from KC SourceLink, they have been able to help those businesses increase their revenues. It shows here that they've been able to increase revenues from governmental contracts by about $70 million. Last year was about $113 million. So finally, I would talk about the vibrant campus. What we can tell you is that I mentioned before that successful students are students who live on campus. They take a full load, they have a job, and they participate in extracurricular activities, and we have to provide that environment here. A lot of the construction that's going on here, we talked about this before, is aimed at building that kind of environment. We'll also tell you that we've had some successes in athletics, in that we had, and that's very important extracurricular activity for our students. We've got our NCAA certification. Our graduation rates among student athletes is extraordinary. Not only is it 10% higher than the average in the NCAA Division I, but it's 7% higher than the goal. You can see our average GPA for those students is 3.18, and that some of the academic progress rates for those students is for some of the teams is in the top 10%. They're not just great academically, but they're also great in their sports, in that we've for the first time in many, many years, we've started to win some championships, and we even have a student who will be participating in the long jump and the triple jump. But I would have to tell you as well that there are many other efforts going on this campus to improve student success. That includes our early warning system that we're putting in place to intervene proactively in students who might be at risk academically. And we also have a formal retention plan that we're working on. Just very quickly, that's all I was going to give you about the progress toward the mission. But I did want to mention a few things about enrollment. As I mentioned before, we have really put a focus on increasing summer school enrollment, and some of the results show here that enrollment is up about 13%, both in terms of the headcount and actual student credit hours. And most of that is coming from students who are transferring in from other locations. So there could be something about the economy that's driving students into our university, and we look forward to seeing more of that and even measuring that. When I talked earlier about enrollment, I mentioned that the graduation rate was great. The number of students we had graduating was great, but the concern is that in order to increase our enrollment, we will have to not only replace them, but any losses that we have through retention, through lack of retention. These numbers show that enrollment thus far is up by about 13.5%. That's good, but we have to be very cautious about that. We're not in a position right now to say that we're going to experience that kind of enrollment increase for the year overall. Right now, basically, things are looking pretty flat, but we think this is a good sign. Finally, on stimulus activity, I want to spend a minute here. We have experienced about a 45% increase in the number of proposals that have been submitted. Last year, in the similar period, we had about 207. This year, it's about 203 proposals that have been submitted. We have other initiatives, and I won't read those, but that we will be pursuing to go after the stimulus dollars. The rules right now don't seem to be very clear, and I think the others will report that as well. And one of the things we've heard is that that NIH and the National Science Foundation are looking more at projects that they have in the pipeline than they are at new proposals. So some of that is not going to be very clear. We are doing everything that we can to position ourselves to take advantage of as many of those opportunities as we can. So I will leave it at that. We'll just finish with one short, very short video about the changing face of UMKC. We've got lots of construction going on, and you've probably been exposed to some of that. Thank you.
Hey, Leo?
Yes.
The Southwest Early College Program, oh, I'm sorry.
Good music.
Yes. I'm sorry, Warren?
No, that's fine. I appreciated that. The Southwest Early College Program at the former Southwest High School,
Yes.
is that a charter school that we're doing with this early college emphasis? And do we hold the charter for that charter school, or is it a center where we're just bringing in kids from other schools? I'd like to understand that a little better.
Okay, we hold the charters to, I think, about 8 schools, right? We are sponsors for about 8 charters, and I believe we will increase that number by 3. I'm not sure that Southwest is a charter right now, but it is a school that has been started. It's supported by Prep KC, by the university, of course, especially the School of Arts and Sciences, and we provide a number of instructors there to help increase the educational achievement of those students. This is a case where there's been a lot of discussion about the alignment of curriculum. This goes a little bit farther in that you provide not only alignment of curriculum with college, but you provide college professors who actually help those students progress. So, but I will get you some more information on that.
We can take this offline. What
Yes.
I'm interested in knowing is, are other public and charter schools bringing students into this college program that the university is sponsoring, or is this a program only for the charter students at that charter location? But we can take this offline. That's what I'm interested in understanding.
Okay. All right, we'll do that then. All right.
Okay, thank you, Chancellor.
If I can ask the other chancellors to try to 5 to 7 minutes, we're running a bit behind here, so we can stay within some timeline.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to cover 3 topics in 4 minutes. The first topic is enrollment projections at Rolla. Everything is almost alarmingly good. The pre-registration for our summer sessions are up 7.3%, primarily with undergraduate students. And our incoming freshman class for the fall is up almost 5%. So we're projecting about 1,100 incoming freshmen this fall, which is a huge class for us. And to put things in perspective, in 2000, we had a little over 4,600 students on campus, not on campus and off campus, total. And we're projecting in the fall over 6,500 students at S&T. And if you do the math, that's a 41% increase in the student body over an 8 or 9 year period. The next topic I'd like to cover quickly are our research activities and how they relate to these federal stimulus funds that no one quite knows where they are yet. But through the end of May, as of 5 days ago, compared to a year ago, our proposals awarded in dollars are up over 13%. Dollars submitted in proposals are up almost 18%. And our overhead recovery, and this is critically important. In the bad old days, we were giving away the farm in terms of cost sharing and so on, and we're not doing that anymore, and those funds are up almost 19%. With respect to the Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds, we've identified a plethora of shovel-ready projects. Some of them are going to work out, some are not. And as was just mentioned by Leo, this is good and bad, really. If you've got some neat proposals that you submitted in the last year or two, it's good news. But NSF and NIH are basically looking at proposals they've already received to use some of this additional funds to support. We've had several meetings with the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Economic Development in the state. We're anxiously awaiting guidelines because they're getting a tremendous amount of money, and the University of Missouri system can really be in a good position to help both of these state agencies spend that money. And in response, go back please, in response to the governor's Next Generation Jobs program, we've been collaborating with the other campuses and DNR and DED, proposing to provide training and employment opportunities for students to conduct industrial energy audits for companies in the state. And finally, as of May, we've responded specifically. I'll let you read that, but the one thing that I will highlight, since we're in Kansas City, we've got some transportation electrification program proposals, almost over $11 million. We're partnering with the CoCam Battery Company in Kansas City and the Smith Electric Vehicle. We've got a partner in St. Louis with the St. Louis Science Center. So we're really excited about the opportunity to really make some progress in that energy area. Go ahead. And finally, I'll close with some of the accomplishments of our students just in this spring semester. You know about our design teams, and we had an outstanding spring semester. The Formula SAE car competed in the Virginia racing, finished first. The Advanced Aero Vehicle Group Heavy Lift Team finished first in the U.S. and third in the world in the competition in Georgia. This is all this spring. And the Rocket Team finished first in Aesthetics and Team Spirit Award in Huntsville. Go ahead. You all know what mucking is, right? Nobody knows what mucking is. We saw it. Okay, so you do know what mucking is. Well, our women are the world champions. The men finished second, and the combined men and women teams finished second in the latest competition. Steel Bridge Team placed first in a few categories. Human-powered vehicle team, which involves an aerodynamic vehicle with a student pedaling frantically, finished second overall in the competition. And the female sprint won first place. Go ahead. And this is the one we're really proud of. This just happened 2 weeks ago. The Big Deal race competition occurs in Michigan, not surprising, and it attracts over 100 teams from around the world. And we just finished 6th in the world and 3rd in the U.S. In this competition. And our team won the design award in the competition. So this is great news. Go ahead. And I'll close with 2 athletic achievements. One of our baseball pitchers, a junior majoring in electrical engineering, has been named by ESPN, the magazine, as an academic All-American. And finally, Jordan Henry, who's an extraordinary person, he's the 5-time champion in the Great Lakes Valley Conference and an All-American, has finished second in the nation in the pole vault, and he has just been chosen the Student Athlete of the Year in the Great Lakes Valley Conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chancellor. And also congratulations, as most of you know, Chancellor Carney chaired the Energy Summit on the Columbia campus, which was, you heard about earlier, and a tremendous success. So Chancellor Carney, great job with that Energy Summit. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'll bring you a brief update on enrollment and research, federal stimulus from the Columbia campus. We have just, in this time of renewal, in springtime, graduated about 5,000 students and replenishing the workforce in so many exciting ways. And in spite of that, we expect growing enrollment this next year with expected growth of a new class of about 5,500 to 5,700 students, bringing total enrollment for the campus above the 31,000 level. And that enrollment, as you can see from the categories here, is quite diverse, covers a range of the kind of diversity that we'd like to see, with African American enrollment expected to grow with 31%, 28% growth in international students, very good students across the state coming and from out of state coming to the university. So transfer enrollment is up less, but it should be, again, a time of growth, and we've seen that reflected in some other issues here on campus. This growth continues for a variety of reasons. We've been recognized for being one of the top campuses in the nation for producing Fortune 500 CEOs, but this recent honor, one of 2 universities in the nation honored by the Harry S. Truman Scholarship Foundation, designating us as an honor institution focusing on civic responsibility and dedication to the public service. So the kind of service learning their students obtain during their time at the university, and our continued success in developing Truman Scholars and Truman Scholarship winners going on to graduate education then are the reasons behind this very important recognition. As others have indicated, our grants and contracts continues, in spite of the hard economic times, continues to grow effectively. The previous year, it was about a 7% overall growth in revenue from federal funding. This year, so far in the 09 fiscal year, it's about 5%, but it's certainly been stimulated by the federal stimulus funds. And you can see that with the kind of growth in applications that continues up by significantly, I think, a month-to-month kind of comparison. It makes it about a 64% increase if you look month-to-month, April to April a year ago, in federal stimulus or in application of research, often attributable to the federal stimulus. The major grants, just looking in 09, since January of 09, you can see the range of significant research funding coming in from different agencies. I just wanted to emphasize both in-state from agencies like Missouri Department of Mental Health for drug abuse screening to U.S. Army $3.4 million electrical engineering research. I talked about the federal stimulus and just want to take a moment on that because I think you're aware of the diverse kind of funding that's coming through federal stimulus, with the emphasis, as Chancellor Morton mentioned earlier, from pipeline projects. So we certainly are expecting, for example, $5.35 million for an animal resource center due to a previously submitted research proposal to NIH. And as I said, about a 64% increase in applications in April of this year compared to April of a year ago. So that should result in continued growth in federal funding along the pace that's been really quite a record-setting pace, as you're aware, for AAU universities, nationally, public or private. We've had recent attention to some very important, really world path-breaking research that was called to our attention again by the appearance of our Vice Chancellor of Research, Rob Duncan, on 60 Minutes recently. In fact, this occurred right during the Energy Summit, or the day before, so it got a lot of attention then. And I was going to play a brief excerpt from this on 60 Minutes, if that's ready to go. Frank, you're controlling that, I believe. Because this is looking at the issue of cold fusion, and I thought it's of enough significance.
20 years ago, it appeared for a moment that all of our energy problems could be solved. It was the announcement of cold fusion, nuclear energy like that which powers the sun, but at room temperature on a tabletop. It promised to be cheap, limitless, and clean. Cold fusion would end our dependence on the Middle East and stop those greenhouse gases blamed for global warming. It would change everything. But then, just as quickly as it was announced, it was discredited. With so many open questions, we wanted to find out whether cold fusion is more than a tempest in a teapot. So we asked another distinguished physicist to have a look at the research. Rob Duncan is Vice Chancellor of Research at the University of Missouri and an expert in measuring energy. When we first called you and said we'd like you to look into cold fusion for 60 minutes, what did you think when you hung up the phone?
I think my first reaction was something like, well, hasn't that been debunked?
We asked Duncan to go with us to Israel, where a lab called Energetics Technologies has reported some of the biggest energy gains yet.
We are delivering power into the cell.
When I got there, I just kept asking about, okay, how do you know this? How do you know that? How do you get 30%? I mean,
Duncan spent 2 days examining cold fusion experiments
I'm just skeptical because I'm always skeptical.
and investigating whether the measurements were accurate.
Do you measure that aluminum temperature directly or just assume it's equal?
And when you walked out of the Israeli lab, you thought what?
I thought, wow, they've done something very interesting here.
He crunched the numbers himself and searched for an explanation other than a nuclear effect.
I found that the work done was carefully done and that the excess heat, as I see it now, is quite real.
Since the event on 60 Minutes, we've had a workshop on our campus bringing in experts on cold fusion. And Dr. Duncan on June the 2nd, just as we were coming here, briefed the Secretary of Defense sub-officials, very high level, on this issue, and significant new work is being undertaken now that he will continue to play a very important role in. So it promises a very major breakthrough in energy, and the Energy Summit sort of highlights the role that we have played as a university in that, and this was a fortuitous coming together of expertise, which so often happens. And so we are looking forward to more major work in this area. We've recently opened a new business incubator. We appreciate Curator Frazier being with us for that initiative, which will stimulate more technology transfer from our research labs, consistent with the plan that President Forsey is laying out for our system. We now have 5 firms in the incubator. There are room for 14. Several of those firms, in fact, I believe 4 of the 5 are from locally based initiatives coming out of our campus. Others are related to major firms that are trying to stimulate new incubation activity in the incubator, and several others are being evaluated now. We have a lot of support from our Centennial Investors Venture Capital Group in Columbia, and it's an exciting new day in that regard for entrepreneurship and technology transfer for us. Completing it all here in short order, Curator Walsworth. Just closing by again emphasizing we're very proud of our Missouri Tigers, the comprehensive athletic program we have, being ranked #1 for the 2nd year in a row in academic progress in the Big 12. We've done extremely well there and carried 4 Big 12 championships along the way. So another time of celebration as we approach a continued renewal of what we're trying to do as a university. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be quick, like my colleagues, and thanks for this opportunity to talk about University of Missouri St. Louis. I'll start with some good news items. First, we've now been reaccredited. This is a 10-year process. Only 5% of all institutions from the Higher Learning Commission that undergo this process get reaccreditation without any qualification whatsoever, and we received that. This took us about 3 years to prepare for this reaccreditation process, and it's kind of like a community effort. And anyway, so we now have another 10 years of reaccreditation. Big news item, we had a faculty member elected to the National Academy of Sciences. This is a really big deal. And just to give you a sense of that, when I was a dean at SUNY Buffalo, one of my colleagues won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. In crystallography, he wasn't in the academy. He had to win a Nobel Prize to get into the National Academy of Sciences. And it's not just natural sciences. They allow unnatural scientists in as well, political scientists, criminology, criminal justice, so forth. So it's broader than simply the natural sciences. We also had a Guggenheim winner this year. There are only 2 in the state. There was one at WashU and chair of our English department. The stimulus dollars, just like our colleague campuses, we're out there aggressively looking for as many dollars as we can from stimulus funding. 2 successes already. Alexei Demchenko received a grant from the National Institutes of Health through the stimulus funding, and an assistant professor, Bethany Zollman, received a $600,000 award from the National Science Foundation. And we've got a lot of proposals out there, and I'll just mention some. We have criminology, criminal justice faculty members seeking $1 million from the National Institute of Justice. Zuiju and Wesley Harris seeking money from the National Institute of Health. You saw Wesley Harris last night. He got the Entrepreneur of the Year award. Mindy Byer, Character Education in the College of Education, looking for money from the National Institute of Health. And we're looking for $15 million from NIH toward our Benton-Stadler complex. This is beyond the money we're looking through House Bill 22. And an interesting project that we're gearing up for is looking for new market tax credits for a new building that we're planning to build in Grand Center that will house KWMU and also some of our other activities that are going on academically. We've got a several percent enrollment increase at this point in time. Actually, in freshman numbers, we're double digits. Freshmen only represent about a quarter of our new students because most of our students are transfers, and the transfers are up. And we're looking at, when we look at enrollment projections, we really focus on on-campus enrollment. And if you see, when you hear that there's 16,000 students at University of Missouri St. Louis, it's really about 12,500 students that are degree-seeking students. Another 3,500 students are taking our courses in the schools, advanced credit and things of this sort. Three quick student successes. We had a student, Angela Toole, in anthropology, just won a Fulbright scholarship. Our student newspaper got the Best in the State award from the Missouri College Media Association. We had a group of students that raised nearly $30,000 in a Relay for Life for American Cancer Society. 30 in a row they've done that. They've raised almost $100,000 in that. In spite of the tight economic times, our giving has really gone way up. I mean, for us as an institution, we jumped from around $16 million last year to now we're going to hit about $25 million in private giving. And so we're on the right trajectory, and we really feel good about that. And let me give you two quick examples. One example is the Foundation for Credit Education is creating what's called the Center for Excellence in Financial Counseling on the campus, and they just transferred $3.5 million of assets to us. And one of our outstanding business alums, Peter Schick, he's the chair of the Moneta Group in St. Louis. He just gave us a $1.7 million gift to endow a new professorship in finance. And my last slide is that Vice President Joe Biden was on campus with his wife, Dr. Jill Biden. She's a full-time professor in Delaware Technical and Community College, and the theme was access for middle-class Americans. They spent the whole morning on campus. I know Cheryl Walker, Curator Walker was there. Curator David Wassinger was there for that event. And it was just terrific. And I think it really highlighted particularly well our university because, you know, most of our first-time students are transfers from community colleges. It's something we do extremely well at the university. That's it, under 3 minutes or whatever.
Somebody had you on the clock.
I knew you'd come through.
All right. Thank you, Chancellor. It's time to move into the consent agenda. I know, where is Curator Wassinger? I know he had an interest in this. He had asked that we kick the number 6, the Student Legal Services Expansion Pilot Program, off the consent agenda, and so we're going to do that, and hopefully he'll be back. Did you have some concerns there too?
Here he comes. Yeah, I mean, basically, I think there's like to have a little more discussion about this proposal, and not. We can maybe deal with the consent agenda, and then as David shows up, we can have a discussion about that separately.
All right. Any other concerns about the consent agenda? And if not, we'll entertain a motion to approve that with the exception of item number 6.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Call the roll.
Consent agenda items 1 through 5 with motion of Curator Walsworth and a second by Curator Walker. Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Erdman?
Yes.
Curator Frazier?
Yes.
Curator Haggard is absent. Curator Russell?
Yes.
Curator Walker?
Yes.
Curator Walsworth?
Yes.
Curator Wassinger?
Yes.
8 no, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I voted for it, but I do want to point out that I've been on the board now 4.5 years, and so is Curator Russell for his second term. Historically, we used to always have a meeting in Southwest Missouri, and every 6 years. And I just note that with the approval of the new agenda and the locations, that once again we haven't been there for at least 8 years. So I just point that out, and hopefully the board, that was one of the items we discussed, and I just think it appropriate that we visit all areas of the state of Missouri.
We had that discussion concerning the survey, and we're going to revisit that, and that's an appropriate thing. Thank you, John. General Counsel, do you want to talk about that item number 6, or?
We vote, we're not gonna vote on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we not call a roll? Yeah, we did call a roll. Don, you're confusing me. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Steve, I'm easy to confuse. Steve, did you want to make some comments about that?
Well, I'll simply talk about my office's proposed involvement in it. We are not necessarily proposing this service, but we were willing, having heard from the campus and the students that this was something that they were desirous of. My office was willing to provide some assistance, both in putting it together in a way that complied with necessary insurance and complied with Code of Professional Responsibility, and also to assist in supervision as it gets off the ground the first couple years as a pilot program. But in terms of the need for it or the desire for it, I guess I would defer to the campus and let them speak to that.
Kathy, did you want to make some comments?
Come all the way up.
Please.
Okay. Good. For about the past 4 years, we have a student legal services program. We have an attorney that provides educational information to our students. They're not allowed to litigate. They're not allowed to represent students, and we've had this for since about 1974. For about the past 4 years, our students have asked, could we have a service where the attorney was allowed to represent us? And in a manner that we thought was appropriate, we said, okay, go ahead, write something up. Well, 4 years ago, they wrote something up that was not very acceptable, and so they kept coming back and working with us. We asked the General Counsel about 2 years ago to review the proposal that the students had. The questions came back. The General Counsel then retired. Steve Owens had inherited the proposal, and he gave us a great deal of feedback and things. But what our students are saying is that in certain areas they feel underrepresented in the community, particularly in landlord-tenant concerns and some consumer concerns. We have data from the types of things that the legal educator is presented with annually, and clearly the outstanding number of them are landlord-tenant concerns where students sign leases, they think they understand what the leases say. When it comes time to get their deposit back, they aren't allowed to get it back. The landlord is pretty heavy-handed, and they're out there $300 or $400. But it's not just one student, it's a lot of students, it's a number of our international students. And so they felt that the students are saying, with this service, and we're willing to pay for it, we feel that our students will be better represented.
I mean, the student will pay for it?
Yes, yes. Student fees will pay for it, and then the student that...
How do you pay for it?
No, the student fees will pay for it, for some of it, but the student that goes to litigation, that student will have to also pay some type of a copay, I guess that's what we'll call it.
I don't know how I feel about this, but this could go a long, boy, this could just be a monumental bunch of material on your office. I mean, I don't see how you could put enough perimeters, guidelines to make this thing work. I just don't think we have the staff. We're trying to get all of our ducks in order, if you will, on far as the rules and regulations that we have to abide by. And I think Steve's got, at this time, his staff's got more work than what he can probably do at this time, let alone put another layer on that.
After talking to Tony last night, he's in full support of this. The only thing, his main concerns were some of the regulations around it and how students would be prioritized because there is so much of a need for representation for the students. And everybody's paying it out of student fees, even if they are going to pay that extra amount, you know, once they have the legal services. How is it going to be decided one student over the other once they have too much on their caseload.
One of the things that General Counsel has asked us has said that there are going to be, it's very clear what the parameters will be. There are only two types of litigation that could proceed. On other campuses, and there are there's a national survey that's done every 4 years, and out of the 26 respondents, you know, KU has a cadre now of 4 lawyers that are supported by student fees that's run on the campus, not out of the General Counsel's office. And this would be a pilot program because we appreciate the kinds of concerns and issues that could arise, and General Counsel has said, you know, we want to be engaged in both the hiring of a person that will be doing this, and we want to be engaged in making sure, watching the caseload and everything. And our commitment would be to come back to you in 2 years and say, it's working, or it's not, or here's the way we want to tweak it. But as I say, because the students have continued to say that they just feel like this service is very, very necessary, that we're bringing it to you today.
I'd like to see a lot more structure. I'd like to see a lot more information before I'd want to vote on this issue. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but David.
Is anybody going to move approval of this?
I do.
Okay.
Would it be helpful if I read at least the restrictions we've got right now?
Sure.
Yeah.
Some of the restrictions that my office has suggested, and they've been accepted, is that first of all, obviously, that the attorney would be covered by professional liability insurance. Secondly, that there would be a restriction on what type of lawsuits that they could file. The only lawsuits that they could file would be either landlord-tenant or debt collection, credit card type lawsuits. They could not file any other types of litigation. All litigation would have to be in Boone County. There could be no intra-university litigation. In other words, the student could not sue another student, could not sue a staff member, could not sue an employee, could not sue an affiliated organization of the university. That there would be a conflicts type check before there be any litigation filed, and that the Office of General Counsel would be permitted to approve or disapprove of the filing of any lawsuit. And that would be a pilot project for the first 2 years. At the end of that 2-year period, the campus would be required to come back and make a report to the board as to whether the program should be continued or discontinued.
Steve, how do you feel about the program?
Well, I guess I'm somewhat persuaded that other universities have these programs in a much more robust way. I did have a fairly detailed conversation about it with my counterpart at KU, and they have 4 full-time lawyers in a separate office that represent students. So apparently it can be done, and I cannot give you information as to the need for it. I'm not exactly anxious to take on another task for my office, but I really don't see any other way to make sure that the pilot or that the startup of this program gets done appropriately. So if it's going to be done, we're willing to take on that role.
How much are you going to increase the student fees?
Right now, the students have some excess from fees, and so in order to get this program started, we'll hire somebody half-time, and they do have the funding for that for the FY10. Then after that, if I don't believe in this climate we should be increasing those fees, and we will have to ask the students to reallocate and look at their priorities. And quite honestly, I think that's a very good exercise for our students to have. And I think that would be well done. Yes, sir.
The president has a comment.
Yeah, Steve and I met earlier this spring, I can't remember when it was, with the student body president and vice president, and frankly, I was skeptical as we went to the meeting. I did my homework and had many of the same questions or concerns about how do you fence this in, but when you listen to the student perspective about what they're up against and what they come equipped with versus a landlord or credit card company, it's very compelling. And so to put in place a pilot, that we manage and we have fenced and controlled, I think is the right thing to do, to recognize the students' willingness to fund this, and if we find we can't control it or we can't keep the fence around it, then so be it. But I was swayed by hearing the student voice, because I went in with the same questions around, well, this is going to end up with all the parameters that you could imagine. So to to me, a pilot is a low threshold of commitment at this point in time.
You know, I'd like to make two observations. First, personally, as a landlord of students, this is certainly against my, and as a practicing attorney, this type of action is against my economic best interest. But that has nothing to do with the decision-making process today. We have several constituencies. They include our students. Our students have researched it.
Yeah, they really
They have brought this before. They apparently have done a good job. Our staff has investigated it, and I think we need to hear the needs of our constituency. I mean, we're not paying for it. I know of we may alienate the landlord community in Columbia, but I'm not sure that's our constituency. So I certainly hope we would consider at least a pilot program.
I agree with you, John. I think this has been needed for a long time, and I think the students are very wise to want to allocate some of their student fees to this. I agree with the restrictions that Steve has put on it, and I think we ought to take a hard look after 2 years. But I think these students need this type of legal service and have needed it for a long time.
Well, if moved and seconded, I'm going to vote against this. I do not favor the mission creep. I do not favor the university kind of getting in the business of private litigation on behalf of private individuals. I do not favor using student fees by the many to pay for the legal representation of the few. And I don't want to put the camel's nose under the tent. And so I'm going to vote no, but I guess we'll have a vote on it.
Kathy, as I understand it right now, we have a full-time attorney who is able to advise the students if they were to come in, correct?
That's right.
But he's not able to represent them in any litigation.
That's correct, and he's not able to represent them at all.
That's a good example of mission creep. He is not to practice law, so he's not to give legal advice.
He's
a legal educator.
He's a legal educator,
He can advise them, but he's not to write letters on their behalf or prosecute any cases.
That's correct, that's correct.
Excuse me, John, did you make a motion?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not realize you did.
Was it seconded?
I never heard a second.
I second the motion.
Okay, well, we have a motion and a second, and we'll continue the discussion then. I'm sorry, John, I did not hear you make that motion.
Yeah, I asked Steve, and I don't think, I think is there a legal services office in Columbia or Central Missouri?
Like a legal aid?
You have legal, I just donate, I'm a fan of legal services. I just donated some money to them, so it's not as though I'm opposed to legal aid. Is there a legal aid office in Central Missouri?
I believe there is a legal aid office in Central Missouri.
Let me tell you, here is from personal experience, and again, I'm a fan of legal aid, but you can get involved in litigation or mission creep. I've been involved, we are on the other side of these cases, where I represent some banks that on these consumer credit. I just tried a lawsuit here in Kansas City. You talk about keeping things in Boone County, Steve. Lawsuit's filed against one of my clients. I'm going to have a thing removed in the federal court in the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Because it's a federal statute, you're going to get it removed. So it's either going to be kicked over, it's going to be heard in Jeff City, or it's going to be heard in Kansas City. Okay, so now you've got an attorney who's having to commute to Jeff City or Kansas City. I just tried a case. It was a $2,000 case. $160,000 after that it paid to our law firm defending the case over a $2,000 statutory claim. Our client takes the position, a hardline stance, we're now settling these cases. If you get involved, if I'm on the other side of one of these cases, and our client is the same type of clients that I represent now, I'm going to put this guy through the ringer, and we're going to take him to the mat. I'm going to see him over in Kansas City, and we'll end up trying the case. We'll end up going to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals if need be, and it turns into a Pandora's box. And I'm not going to mention that there were a bunch of legal aid types involved in this case. The attorney that ended up trying that case was not, Don knows, in order to try cases, you got to try cases. The person that tried that case did not know what they were doing. We ended up waxing him at trial, and then you got a potential malpractice claim against not just the lawyer that was involved in the case. You now have a potential legal malpractice claim against the University of Missouri, who employs that lawyer. I think it opens a Pandora's box. I think it's, as Warren said, mission creep. And if you get involved in some contested litigation over what you think is going to be a $500 or a $2,000 claim, I'll tell you what, it's going to turn into something and I've been involved in a bunch of them. I'm just, and I'm in favor of legal aid. They need to go over to the legal aid office in Columbia or Jeff City, get it done, and if they have a claim, see the advisor, get their advice, and then move on. If either a lawyer who does a lot of public service type work, or go to the legal aid office over in Columbia and let them deal with it.
Okay, Doug?
Bo, I can see where there may be a need for this, and I guess if we were in different times, I would be inclined to consider it, but I guess my concern is that we continue to look for new things to do in a time where we ought to be looking for fewer things to do better. And so at this particular time, I'd have a hard time supporting it.
I feel the same way.
The other thing, and I asked T. Graham, before I forget, whoever does the academic chair of that, I'm concerned about these student fees Mission Creek.
I hear you.
I requested those from Steve Graham. I'd like to add on the agenda the Academic and Student Affairs Committee to address how they're being spent.
You know, it appears that, you know, you have some issues and concerns about this, and we can do some more work and respond to your current concerns.
Let me just make one other point. I think this is something the students really want. I think we're going to alienate a major constituency, as John has mentioned. I think we've got very strong controls. No lawsuit will be filed unless Steve Owen says it should be filed, as I understand the restrictions that Steve has proposed. I agree with you, David, that landlords and creditors can exert a lot of pressure and make the debtor and make the tenant go through a lot of hoops. But without a lawyer, they're going to have to do that on their own, because as we know, there's not enough lawyers that will take these cases pro bono. There's just not. So we're going to leave our students in a position where they're not going to be able to defend themselves. They're not going to have a lawyer. And what's gone on, as we all know, for a long time in Columbia, is going to continue. I think this is a big deal, and I think we're making a big mistake if we say no to the students.
You know, how many levels of professional service do we provide? Don't we provide psychological counseling?
Yes, sir, we do.
Do we provide medical care for our...
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay. If we provide professional services in that area, we have the same malpractice risk, we have the same issues. So I guess my concern is that, once again, we have a constituency who has a need, who has asked us for their help, and I think we have a responsibility to listen to our constituency. And legal aid is, at least where I live, is not functioning well. When they refer me criminal cases and ask me to go over and represent people in bail hearings, and my clients are in big trouble. And so legal aid where I live is so overworked. When they ask a tax attorney to do that kind of work, then that's I don't think they have time to help our students.
Okay, I think the lines are drawn. We just go ahead and call for the question.
Okay. We have a motion by Curator Carnahan and a second by Curator Walker. Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Erdman?
No.
Curator Frazier?
Yes.
Curator Haggard is absent. Curator Russell?
No.
Curator Walker?
Yes.
Curator Walsworth?
No.
Curator Wassinger?
No.
It's a vote of 4 and 4, sir.
No, it does not advance, so that takes care of that. Well, good discussion. We're ready to move to the rest of the agenda. Curator Haggard is not present.
I'll simply report that in the committee we reviewed the Caring for Missourians proposition that has been brought forward and funded on a one-time basis, and Steve Graham reviewed the game plan that each of our professional schools that would be receiving those funds will deploy. We'll obviously need to keep our eye on how that program works over the next couple of years and make a determination about continuation based on funding sources as well as potential reallocation of campus resources. But I think it was a good report, and we're very supportive of $24 million that's coming into the university to get this program started.
Okay, thank you, Gary. John, Audit Committee?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We had our Audit Committee meeting yesterday. We had 5 informational items and just 2 action items. The informational items were a review of the Audit Committee annual plan, which Nikki has prepared, and we reviewed that. we reviewed briefly our audit committee charter, and we're going to have a off-cycle meeting sometime, probably the next 2 to 3, 4 weeks, to discuss that a little bit further. We received a report, an internal audit report, from a representative of PricewaterhouseCoopers. We did ask, and I've spoken with Nikki about this, we're going to get a little more detail about what some of the problems are, more examples, and we're going to try and reach a fair balance of how much detail we go into, and at the same time have a little better understanding of how the internal audit works and how the problems that are disclosed are resolved. And then a checklist. I believe they incorporated Curator Walsworth's request for stoplight approach, and so we have 3 color codings, which I found very useful and appreciate that. We distributed a matrix from the AICPA Governmental Audit Handbook. Our goal is to shorten that to 2 to 3 pages. I think we will incorporate Nikki's annual plan in there also, and the idea is that the members of the audit committee and anyone else who would like to, please provide your comments to Nikki and myself, and we will then prepare a redraft for discussion at our off-cycle meeting. And then once again, we're trying to schedule the off-cycle meeting. Our only action for approval of the audit committee meeting of April the 2nd, and then we adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, John. Curator Russell, you're up.
I think all the board members were present at the Finance Committee, so I won't continue to use more time reviewing the information items. We did have 4 information items that was presented. We also have 7 action items that are being brought before the board today for action. The first is a result of the asset liability study. The committee is recommending that the board approve an asset allocation mix that's identified in your booklet as alternative number 3, and that asset allocation for the retirement, disability, and death benefit plan be approved.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Call roll.
Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Erdman?
Yes.
Curator Frazier?
Yes.
Curator Russell?
Yes.
Curator Walker?
Yes.
Curator Walsworth?
Yes.
Curator Wassinger?
No.
It's a vote of 7 and 1.
The second action item is the 2010, fiscal year 2010 operating budget. And the Finance Committee and the board, other board members were involved in that discussion yesterday, and the committee moves that the president be authorized to develop the 2009-2010 current funds budget based on the assumptions that were presented in the board materials.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Call roll.
Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Erdman?
Yes.
Curator Frazier?
Yes.
Curator Russell?
Yes.
Curator Walker?
Yes.
Curator Walsworth?
Yes.
Curator Wassinger?
Yes.
It's a vote of 8 and 0, sir.
The third action item is the sale of $125 million of capital project notes. And again, the committee recommends the approval.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Call roll.
Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Erdman?
Yes.
Curator Frazier?
Yes.
Curator Russell?
Yes.
Curator Walker?
Yes.
Curator Walsworth?
Yes.
Curator Wassinger?
Yes.
Vote of 8 and 0, sir.
The fourth item is the schematic design for the patient care tower at University of Missouri Healthcare, and the committee moves that that be approved.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Call roll.
Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Erdman?
Yes.
Curator Frazier?
Yes.
Curator Russell?
Yes.
Curator Walker?
Yes.
Curator Walsworth?
Yes.
Curator Wassinger?
Yes.
Vote of 8 no, sir.
There was some discussion yesterday about including $35 million in the systems facility revenue bonds for critical repair, renovation, and adaptation capital projects system-wide. And the committee is recommending its approval.
So moved.
Have a second?
Moved by Curator Walsworth and seconded by Curator Downing.
Discussion?
Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Erdman?
Yes.
Curator Frazier?
Yes.
Curator Russell?
Yes.
Curator Walker?
Yes.
Curator Walsworth?
Yes.
Curator Wassinger?
Yes.
Voted 8 no, sir.
The sixth item is the Finance Committee moves that the resolution declaring the intention of the curators of the University of Missouri to issue certain revenue bonds as outlined in the materials be approved.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Motion by Curator Walsworth and a second by Curator Downing. Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Erdman?
Yes.
Curator Frazier?
Yes.
Curator Russell?
Yes.
Curator Walker?
Yes.
Curator Walsworth?
Yes.
Curator Wassinger?
Yes.
It's a vote of 8 no, sir.
And the last action item is the authorization to employ the firm, and I'm not sure the pronunciation on this, Bezonian
Bezoian?
Group out of St. Louis. This is for design services for Mark Twain Hall, the renovation of the hall and dining facilities, a lump sum fee of $1 million for the University of Missouri Columbia campus. The Finance Committee, after discussion, recommends this approval.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Call the roll.
I'll remind the board that this was subject to approval of debt financing of these projects.
Yeah, as amended in that.
As
right.
amended, thank you. Motion by Curator Walsworth and a second by Curator Downing. Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Erdman?
Yes.
Curator Frazier?
Yes.
Curator Haggard? Is absent, I apologize. Curator Russell?
Yes.
Curator Walker?
Yes.
Curator Walsworth?
Yes.
Curator Wassinger?
No.
Vote of
Chairman?
7 and 0, sir.
No.
7 and 1, I beg your pardon.
That concludes the report of the Finance Committee.
Well, that was fairly short
That was a
time of a lot of work that went in yesterday.
spent a lot of time yesterday getting through that.
That's what
And,
committees are all about.
And we do appreciate the participation of all the board and the administration in helping us make it through it in a really a reasonable amount of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good job. Good job, moving on, Kathy, the draft agenda for July, do we have that?
Yes, sir.
Is it in the? Okay, all right, very good. Everybody's okay with that? We have a couple resolutions, one for Tony Luchtenmeyer and then one for Gordon Lamb. Kathy, are you going to read those
I will be pleased to.
resolutions?
The resolution for Anton
that?
H. Lukemeyer. Whereas Anton H. Lukemeyer served with distinction as the student representative to the Board of Curators from July 26, 2007 until July, and I'm going to change that, 4th, 2009. And whereas during that period, he effectively and professionally represented the diverse interests of students from all 4 campuses of the University of Missouri. And whereas while addressing the Academic, Student, and External Affairs Committee, of which he was an ex officio member, or the Board of Curators as a whole, he was an eloquent and articulate spokesperson. And whereas on students' behalf, he advocated keeping a University of Missouri education affordable and accessible. And whereas while tending to university business, he maintained a positive attitude, offered compelling ideas, and proved a good listener and debater. And whereas he proved a valuable member of the University of Missouri System Presidential Search Committee. And whereas in addition to performing his board duties, he completed his law degree at the University of Missouri Columbia. And whereas in keeping with his demonstrated knowledge of law, he plans to work as a clerk for the Missouri Supreme Court after completing and passing the Missouri Bar exam. And whereas the diplomacy skills he learned while serving as the student representative to the Board of Curators will serve him well in his pending marriage to Lucinda Housley. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Curators, on behalf of the students, faculty, staff, and alumni of the University of Missouri System, and on behalf of the citizens of the state of Missouri, does hereby adopt this resolution in appreciation of the dedicated and devoted service of Anton H. Lukemeyer. Be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Board of Curators cause this resolution to be spread upon the minutes of this meeting, and a duly inscribed copy thereof be furnished to Anton H. Lukemeyer.
So moved. Second.
We have motion second. Call a roll.
Curator Carnahan on the motion?
Yes.
Thank you. Curator Walker on the second. Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Erdman?
Yes.
Curator Frazier?
Yes.
Curator Haggard is absent. Sorry about that. Curator Russell?
Yes.
Curator Walker?
Yes.
Curator Walsworth?
Yes.
Curator Wassinger?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
The resolution for Gordon H. Lamb. Whereas Gordon H. Lamb served with distinction as interim president of the University of Missouri System from April 9th, 2007 until February 18th, 2008. Whereas he served as executive vice president of the University of Missouri System from February 18th, 2008 until March 1, 2009. And whereas during the presidential search process and transition period, his assistance and advisement were invaluable. And whereas his commitment to the university includes serving as interim chancellor of the University of Missouri-Kansas City from February 1999 until March 2000. And whereas he exemplified the university's mission of teaching, research, service, and economic development. And whereas while serving as executive vice president, he demonstrated his dedication to the expansion of online education. And whereas he was committed to alleviating the state and nation's shortage of healthcare professionals through the Caring for Missourians initiative. And whereas he was a strong advocate for investing in higher education and freedom of research in Jefferson City. And whereas, further demonstrating his dedication to higher education, he served in leadership positions at many other prestigious institutions across the country. Whereas he serves an ambassador for the arts through his passion and participation in choral music. And whereas Mrs. Lamb so graciously and capably served the University of Missouri as First Lady during Dr. Lamb's period as interim president, and her time and efforts were greatly appreciated. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Curators, on behalf of the students, faculty, staff, and alumni of the University of Missouri System, and on behalf of the citizens of the state of Missouri, does hereby adopt this resolution in appreciation of the dedicated and devoted service of Dr. Gordon H. Lamb. And be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Board of Curators cause this resolution to be spread upon the minutes of this meeting, and a duly inscribed copy thereof be furnished to Gordon H. Lamb.
So moved.
Second. Anybody?
Second?
Curator Downing, second.
Okay. Call a roll.
Motion by Curator Walker and a second by Curator Downing. Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Keith?
Did I make a mistake on the motion?
No.
Okay. Curator Carnahan?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Erdman?
Yes.
Curator Frazier?
Yes.
Curator Russell?
Yes.
Curator Walker?
Yes.
Curator Walsworth?
Curator Walsworth.
Don?
Don?
Yes.
Thank you. Curator Wassinger?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. I think that concludes the business of the board.
Mr. Chairman, just one thing from the Comp and Human Resources. We have scheduled our review of benefits for August 20th. I'm advised by Betsy Rodriguez that the agenda for that is, as we all might guess, pretty comprehensive. And I've confirmed with all the members of the committee that they would be willing to stay over on Friday, the 21st of August, the morning thereof, for additional time to consider these things, and so that, as we discussed yesterday morning, we don't feel rushed to go through this, because this is obviously a very complicated and comprehensive review. And so I've just announced to everyone that we decided that this would be the 20th, beginning at 10:30, and probably go into the morning of the 21st until noon.
Okay.
The other thing I'd like to do is, and I'm gonna be with Gary this afternoon, so I'll talk to him about a potential agenda. I'd like to get the dates for, who is on the Resources and Planning Committee, Kathy? Are you on, Warren?
Yeah.
Hey, Warren. What day was that?
Thursday, the 20th of August, and Friday, the
We've got
21st.
those names at hand,
Warren,
so
who else?
happy to schedule
Does
it.
anyone know if
yeah,
they're on
it's,
the,
it's in the minutes.
I don't know if I don't remember.
Here, I'll get it for you.
we've been, again, as new curators, I don't know, I'd like to.
Hey, Dave.
Let's pick a
David?
date. Are you on it?
No, I'm on it, yeah, but you know, there might, Cheryl and I might be here for a long time.
I'm gathering that. That's why I'm going ahead and picking a
Keep
date.
referring to new curators, I think,
Well,
we might be here a long time.
Well, the way it's going, you're gonna outlast me on this doggone board.
We might do that.
David, I'll be pleased to schedule that meeting on Monday. I can.
You wanna do that?
Be happy to.
Okay, let's find out who's on the committee.
Yep.
You, Doug, and Cheryl.
I'm on your committee. You're gonna
All
get a
right,
memo.
we need
out,
to-
aren't you, Joe? All right.
We really need to wrap up. Don, you had something.
One other question, Mr. Chairman. I see on our schedule, we have a teleconference on July 24th. I'm not sure if we've set a time for that. Do we have it?
And we probably won't set until we know the agenda.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
I move we adjourn.
Do you anticipate that?
I wouldn't anticipate. I think it'll be very similar to what last July's meeting was, just a couple.
Two things, very quickly. Word circulated around that Betsy Rodriguez is now a doctor, a PhD. Congratulations, Betsy. And a special thank you to Kathy. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes into preparing for this meeting, and she always does an outstanding job. So, Kathy, a special thank you for all the effort you put into getting everything lined up for us.
If I may see up front before everybody scatters, Curator Wassinger, Curator Walsworth, Curator Frazier, Morton, Knorr, Nichols, and Owens up front here before everybody scatters for a afternoon logistics discussion very quickly.
A motion to adjourn, Kathy?
At the telepresence tour at the Administrative Center, and the van will be out on the east side here.
We have a motion to adjourn. A second? Warren, did you second that motion?
Second.
Sure did.
Call the roll. Yes, I think everybody voted yes.
Carnahan, Curator Downing,
Yes.
Curator Erdman,
Yes.
Curator Frazier,
Yes.
Curator Russell,
Thanks for that email and
Walker.
Oh, yeah, wasn't that nice?
trying to get out of here.
I mean, that's just like town money.
Yes, that's right.
You know, and if you can keep doing that,